Hey guys, how are you all? Welcome back to my channel. Today we will see what if Sasuke is obsessed with Fem Naruto. If you enjoy, then please like, share and do comments. He was her everything, the first person she had recognized who shared her loneliness. Her rival, her best friend, her enemy, and now her friend again. Somehow, she had finally gotten through to Sasuke Uchiha. He came back to the Leaf Village after the war, only to leave almost immediately afterwards on a journey of redemption. She remembered that day well. Now stay out of trouble, Sasuke. Naruto and I put in a good word for you, but it wasn't easy. Kakashi said in an infuriating, calming voice. What does he mean by stay out of trouble? Bastard, why are you wearing a traveling cloak? Where are you going? Naruto demanded. I'm going away for a while. The village needs time to recover, and seeing me there isn't going to help. I have to prove that I'm different now. I can't do that here, Naruto. Only Team 7 would ever give me that chance. It's better this way, Sasuke told her. Naruto snapped. She tried to lunge at him, but she was held back. Sakura had stopped her. Sakura, let go of me. We spent years trying to get him back, and now that he's back, he wants to leave again. Naruto growled in a voice that sounded far more like an animal's than a human's. Take us with you, Sakura pleaded as she desperately tried to hold the furious blonde back. You two have nothing to do with my sins. I'll be back, I promise. It's just better if everyone has a chance to grieve and rebuild, before I try to force them to accept me. Sasuke said. Kakashi sighed. He hated to see the look of absolute hurt on Naruto's face. She looked torn between crying and trying to kill the last Uchiha. This was going to get ugly. He's right. Besides Naruto, Sakura, do you really want to voice him to stay if he won't be happy here? He'll just sneak off again anyway. He said and tried to lighten the mood. You promise you'll come back? Naruto asked Sasuke and he nodded. Alright, I don't like it. You should stay here. You can redeem yourself here. But I want you to be happy, and if you can't do that here right now. She trailed off. Sasuke nodded. He headed off without another word. Sasuke had never been one to drag out goodbyes. That had been a few years ago. The village was thriving again. It would be so easy to forget that a war had ever happened. But whenever she glanced down at her arm, she was reminded that it had. She had taken the transplant. It hadn't been easy, but she talked Sasuke into it as well. She wondered how his new arm was working. Naruto wondered how he was doing in general. The blonde truly had no idea where he was or anything. Maybe he was afraid if he did, she would have convinced him to come back sooner. Why did everything have to become so complicated? She asks as she looks at an old photo of Team 7. It was from when they were genin. Back then she hadn't known much about Sasuke back then. She knew he was wicked smart, strong, and a bastard. He had always been a stuck-up bastard. That was a hell of a lot easier to understand than why he was that way. Everything had been taken from him as a small child. She never had a family, except for the brief time when her father had been revived and she was trapped in that other world. Sasuke had. It was more painful for Sasuke to be alone, because he remembered what it was like not be alone. Didn't he notice something was going on? She asks to herself, wondering why neither the third Hokage or her father had done anything about the Uchiha situation before it got so bad, for the 1000th time. She sighs. There was really no use dwelling on the past. It couldn't be changed. The blonde decides to focus on her paperwork. She hated paperwork, but it did serve as a great distraction sometimes. Meanwhile, Sasuke continues his long walk home. It had been years since he had set foot in the Leaf Village. During his travels, he had visited all 5 great nations and even a few of the island nations. He'd traveled far and wide. Sasuke had met many different kinds of people, briefly lived in places with cultures radically different than the ones he had grown up with, ate all kinds of exotic food, and dabbled in what seemed to be dozens of trades. It's enough, he says to himself. He'd helped Naruto to defeat Madara. He'd also saved at least hundreds of lives along his travels. Some he saved from assassins, would-be robbers, or medical emergencies. In some small way, he felt like he had taken the first steps towards, if not erasing his sins, at least making up for them. Sasuke had finally decided to go home over the silliest reason. He'd seen a fox family. Just regular foxes, not summons. Not even an unusual breed. Just red foxes that could be found almost anywhere in the Fire Nation, and in many others. Instantly he had been reminded of the 9 tails, which reminded him of her. He decided to go home. Home, he whispers when he saw the entrance to the Leaf Village come into view. He could see the shocked expressions of the guards. Clearly, they had recognized him. One of them was coming to greet Sasuke. "Sasuke, you're back for good?" he asks warily. The last Uchiha knew the other man was utterly terrified of him. It was to his credit that he had the courage to walk up to him though. Most people would have just run. "I'm back for good. Don't tell Naruto though. I want to surprise her. Do you know where she is?" he asks and the guards nod. "She's in her office now." They answer, not at all eager to deny Sasuke the answer he was seeking. Naruto would want to see him immediately. Sasuke would probably kill them if they didn't answer them. So that was why they didn't hesitate to tell him where she was. "Thanks," he says and flits off. "Did Sasuke fucking Uchiha just say thank you?" one of the guards asks the other. "Yeah, I think so. Hell froze over, I guess. I expect we'll see a pig fly before the day is out." The other replies. Sasuke smirks and heads to the Hokage office. He peeks in through the window. He smiles when he sees Naruto at her desk. Wow, she was actually doing paperwork? He didn't think she'd ever be able to sit still long enough to work on some of the less glamorous aspects of her cageship. He hated to admit it, but she was now a fox in more ways than one. Long golden hair that he was sure reached to her backside out of those pigtails. Her eyes were still the same sapphire blue he remembered. Sun-kissed skin and those adorable whisker-like markings. She was wearing her Hokage robes, but even they couldn't hide the fact that she was definitely a woman now in every conceivable way. Annoying, he mutters. She just had to go and get even more beautiful while he was away. He had barely noticed it before really. They had usually been engaged in a life-or-death battle, so there wasn't really much time for aesthetical observations. But now that the world was at peace, it was another matter. He had to fix this somehow. Sasuke had to restore their previous relationship dynamics. He smirks as he decides exactly how to do that. The last Uchiha sneaks through the window and soon pins the blonde against the wall. Yeah, showing up unannounced after years of being gone, that ought to piss her off. Then they would fight and laugh. Everything would be back to normal. Naruto was Naruto. She never changed. What the hell? Naruto asks and quickly slams her knee into her attacker's stomach, sending him flying, and when he lands on his back, she pins him. Oh, is that any way to greet an old friend? It's really your own fault for letting your guard down to do paperwork. A ninja must always expect the unexpected. He taunts her with a smug smirk. Naruto's eyes widen when she realizes who was underneath her. It was Sasuke. He was back. It had to be him, no one else smirked like that. Sure, a transformation jutsu could help someone look like him. But no one could ever match that arrogant smirk of his. Most people aren't dumb enough to pin the woman who fought against Madara against a wall. So yeah, I guess I was assuming everyone had more working brain cells than you. Clearly, I whacked you in the head too many times. Sorry about that, bastard. She says cheerfully. Sasuke smiles. There was the loser he knew and loved. Everything was back to normal, already. You wish. Oh, and Naruto? Lose the pigtails. They are cute when you're 12, but you're a grown woman now. For fuck's sake, Hokages don't wear pigtails. He tells her. Oh, this from the guy who wore that ugly purple belt for years? She asks. Sorry, the sound didn't exactly have a lot fashion options. I was a little busy focusing on more important things. But seriously, lose the pigtails. Sasuke says. Naruto shakes her head. She undoes the pigtails and Sasuke smiles. Her hair looked like a golden waterfall now. That was better. Naruto suddenly realizes she was straddling Sasuke's waist, and that was incredibly suggestive. She blushes a bit. Damn bastard had to go and get even hotter somehow. Sasuke was Sasuke. She had always wanted him back. But it wasn't like she was Sakura. She wasn't in love with him or lusting after him. Naruto just missed him because he was one of the few people that understood her. So you going to get off of me, or do you want to risk answering some interesting questions whenever your assistant walks in? He asks. Yeah, good point. Sorry, she says and hops off of him. It's alright, I did sneak up on you. Couldn't resist messing with you. So how has everything been? He asks. You're such a bastard. She smacks him. Sasuke blinks. Alright, that wasn't the response he had expected. He had just asked her how everything had been. You leave for years and the first things you say to me are about my hair and to ask me how everything has been? They would have been a lot better if you were here. She yells at him. Naruto, quit yelling. I'll never understand why you want me around so much, if I'm such a bastard. He says and flicks her forehead. Oh, jerk. I want you around because you are my friend. That's why. It doesn't matter that you are a jerk. You're still my friend, she mutters. Sasuke shakes his head. That made absolutely no sense. Then again, he had stopped expecting her to make sense, a long time ago. Naruto just operated on a very different wavelength than most people. Anyone else would have given up on him. They would have tried to kill him before he killed them. But not her. She was loyal to the point of absolute stupidity. He both loved and hated her for it. You're really strange sometimes. So I see you finally became Hokage. Not sure how. You spent more time chasing me around than training. He says with a smirk. Hey, I trained a lot while doing that. Oh, and the whole saving the world thing, kinda helps. She protests and then smiles. He chuckles and caresses her cheek. Sasuke couldn't help it. She was just so cute at the moment. Naruto looks shocked at the gesture and he quickly retracts his hand. I'm glad it's you. I was an idiot when I said I wanted to be Hokage. It's just not me. Besides, I can't imagine sitting behind a desk all day and battling paperwork. He says, that's not all I do. The blonde objects. No, but it's a large part of it. I wonder if you knew that as a child, if you would have been so eager to get this office. Sasuke muses. Naruto huffs. Of course she would have wanted to become Hokage anyway. That was such a stupid thing to say. Anyway, you were gone for years. The least you can do is get me some ramen. She says, it's a good thing that my clan's assets were restored to me. Otherwise, I'd never be able to afford to buy you all the ramen you want. Where do you put it all? He asks. Oh, I kinda think that Kurama speeds up my metabolism, actually. She replies thoughtfully. Didn't know you knew the word metabolism. Come on, let's get you your ramen. He says with a smirk and darts off towards the ramen shop, with an angry blonde racing off behind him. Jerk, I know stuff, she says as she catches up to him. A few minutes later and Sasuke blinks. She was on what had to be her 10th bowl of ramen. Maybe there was something to that whole 9 tails speeding up her metabolism thing. He shakes his head in amusement. Some things never change. It was comforting in a way. So what made you come back? She asks. A whim. He answers. Stop doing that. Come on. I know you don't just randomly decide to do stuff. You are way too OCD to do that. She says. Sasuke raised an eyebrow. Alright. Who gave Naruto a medical textbook? Metabolism and OCD? He blames Sakura. Had to be her fault. She was a medic now, wasn't she? I'll tell you later. Right now, I think I'll get a bowl of ramen. He says. But you hate ramen? She asks in confusion. I don't hate it. I just can't eat 10 bowls of the stuff. Sasuke replies. He eats a bowl and pays for their stuff. Sasuke blinks when Naruto drags him back to Team 7's training grounds. He looks at her quizzically. It's been forever since we last fought. Let's see if you are used to your new arm. She says with a smirk. I guess you missed losing. Alright, he says and gets into position. She smiles. There was nothing like fighting with him. They were so evenly matched. But she knew she'd never match him when it came to the grace department. Poetry in motion. He'd always reminded her of a big cat. Deadly, graceful, and beautiful. You wanted to touch it, but you knew you'd get killed if you did. You're distracted, he says and pins her to the ground. Maybe a little. I'm just really happy you're back. Naruto says and smiles when she sees Sasuke's gaze soften. Brat, just bite him. While I'm not happy you chose an Uchiha, I can understand why. Kurama tells her. What do you mean by bite him? She asks in confusion. Your teeth are lengthening. You won't hurt him when you do it. Bite him and make the claim. He explains. Naruto didn't get it. Bite him? Claim? What was Kyuubi talking about? But suddenly, Sasuke's neck was looking rather inviting. She remembered how Orochimaru had bitten him. He'd placed that damn curse mark on him. Certainly, Orochimaru had made a claim. But she doubted that was what Kyuubi was talking about in this circumstance. That irritated her. She hated that the creep had marked him in that way. She could feel her teeth growing sharper and suddenly, what Kyuubi was saying made a whole lot more sense. Oh, Sasuke says and he jumps off her a few seconds later, when Naruto had bitten him on the neck. He blinks when he pulls his hand away from it. He was bleeding. It wasn't a life-threatening injury. But she had actually drawn some blood. I thought you said that I wouldn't hurt him. She yells at Kyuubi. He's an exceptional ninja who has survived having his arm blown off. I think he can handle a bite. You probably surprised him more than anything. The fox says defensively. Why did you bite me? Sasuke demands. A ninja should expect the unexpected. It got you off me, didn't it? She taunts him with his earlier words. Sasuke shakes his head. Well, she was the #1 unpredictable ninja for a reason, he guessed. He shakes his head and goes back to fighting her. It felt good to be able to fight someone on his level. Someone that he didn't have to hold back with. There were very few people left in the world that he could honestly say that about. Chidori. He roars out and throws the lightning attack at his sparring partner. Rasengan. She yells, countering his move with one of her own. They trained together for hours. While their training would have been lethal to even most jonin, to them it was nothing more than a play fight. Eventually, they both collapse next to each other, panting. Look, a shooting star. Sasuke murmurs as he looks up at the beautiful nighttime sky. Yeah, better make a wish. Naruto says quickly. That is so childish. That doesn't actually work. He says and rolls his eyes at the very notion. It is not and it does too. She says and looks up at the shooting star, making her wish. I wish that he'd stay for good this time, she thinks as she looks up. Maybe this time would be different. The Itachi situation hadn't ended the way he had planned, but clearly he wasn't after revenge anymore. He'd gone on his journey of redemption. There wasn't a reason for him to leave again. What did you wish for? He asks. I can't tell you that. Then it won't come true. The blonde responds. Whatever. He says and closes his eyes. He had only meant to rest them for a moment. But Sasuke had traveled a long time before arriving in the leaf and sparring with Naruto. He was more tired than he thought. So he soon drifted off. Naruto blinks. She knew by the evening out of his breathing, that he had actually fallen asleep. Sasuke had trusted her enough to fall asleep around her. That knowledge was shocking and heartwarming. He looks so different like this. She says and couldn't resist playing with his bangs. They were like silk. She had expected them to be harsh and coarse. His hair looked so spiky, but even his hair texture had to be perfect. Damn it, you could bite him while he is sleeping. Kurama suggests, eager to at last have some peace. Oh, it wasn't that he liked the Uchiha. Far from it really. That boy, Wellman had caused his host an unbearable amount of grief. But he was her mate. Humans rarely found their real mate. It was truly a beautiful thing, when two mate found each other. Even he wouldn't stand in the way of that. He just really wished it hadn't been an Uchiha. What happens if I bite him? She asks. You become mates. Kyuubi replies as if it was the most obvious thing in the world. What does that even mean? The blonde inquires again. Do I honestly have to explain to you where babies come from? Humans would call it marriage, but mating goes much deeper than that. Mating is a soul bond. The Nine Tails attempts to explain. Babies? She sputters. Kyuubi mentally rolls his eyes. He had never seen two beings who needed each other so much, yet were so oblivious. When they were younger, he blamed it on their naivety. Now they were adults, it shouldn't be that difficult for them to figure out. But apparently he was going to have to spell this out. You want him. He wants you. You want him to stay. He wants children to continue his clan. The solution seems obvious. He mutters in annoyance. I don't want him like that. Naruto protests. Really? She expected him to believe that? She had spent years chasing that Uchiha all over the place. And she was claiming she didn't want him. He left when she was 12. She hadn't been a woman. So he completely understood why at first, she didn't understand the drive to bring him back. But now Naruto didn't have that excuse. It was taxing to have to point out the obvious again and again, but he knew the alternative was having a miserable host. Which meant he would also be miserable. Deny it all you like. We both know the truth. He says and shuts off the link, not wanting to her sputter and protest the obvious further. Damn furball. She grumbles and eeps when a sleeping Sasuke grabs her and pulls her down next to him. Naruto found out something very shocking that night. Sasuke Uchiha was apparently a cuddler. Well, at least he was subconsciously. She tries to wiggle out of his hold, but it was no use. The only way she could get out is if she hit him hard enough to wake him. That seemed cruel. He looked so peaceful. Besides, she was so tired and he was so nice and warm. She yawns and soon drifts off to sleep in his arms. Sasuke wakes up a few hours later. He was confused at first. His pillow was very comfortable, but also very warm and squishy. The last Uchiha could also hear a steady thump-thump. That was when he realized what had happened. He had fallen asleep at the training grounds and somehow, he had ended up using Naruto's chest as his pillow. Thank God, she's always been a heavy sleeper. He mutters and sighs in relief. If she ever found out that he thought her breasts made excellent pillows, all hell would break loose. Feeling a bit awkward, he picks her up bridal style. He flits off with the sleeping blonde nestled between his arms. The last Uchiha figured things would be much less awkward if she didn't wake up with his head on her chest or laying on the hard forest floor. He and Naruto had slept on far worse things than the forest floor. But that didn't mean that he had to let her wake up with a sore neck or back for no reason. Sasuke sets her gently on his bed. He then goes and looks at the mirror. She got me good. He mutters and blinks at the rather dark bruise on his neck. Thankfully, it had stopped bleeding. Sasuke had always been a rather fast healer for a normal person. He didn't have a nine-tailed fox inside him to accelerate his healing process, but he was fairly lucky as far as most people went. Even so, he estimated that the mark was probably going to last for at least 2 or 3 days. Looks like the medic training rubbed off on me. Trying to diagnose myself and everything. He mutters. Sasuke had realized it wasn't entirely fair to use Karen as a human chew toy. If his injuries weren't too serious, he should be able to tend to them. So during his travels, he would occasionally ask a medic to give him lessons. Most agreed because they knew who he was. They would rather teach Sasuke how to heal than risk getting killed. Even if he was no longer an S-class criminal ninja, his former reputation was a shadow that he couldn't shake. People were always either in awe of him or terrified of him. Sometimes they were in awe and terrified of him, simultaneously. His chakra control had always been good. Nothing like Sakura's though, but his Sharingan had made learning much easier than it would have been otherwise. If he had enjoyed the work, he probably could have passed an official exam at this point. He'd never reach Tsunade or even Kabuto's level of skill in this field, but he figured he was competent. Could probably get rid of it. He mutters. Sasuke dismisses the idea. It was such a minor thing. Hardly worth the effort. That and after everything that he'd done to Naruto, he more than deserved it. He would never understand her. It seemed like the blonde had an almost infinite capacity to forgive people, even if they couldn't forgive themselves. Sasuke sighs, it was going to get her killed one day. Good thing he was back now. He wouldn't let that happen. Wonder how long she'll be out. She's a surprisingly heavy sleeper for a ninja. He observes and pulls some blankets over the sleeping blonde. Naruto snuggles into the blankets. Sasuke wasn't sure what she was dreaming about. But whatever it was, she was enjoying it. She was smiling and wiggling around a lot. She felt something wet on her nose. Confused, her blue eyes open. It was water? The roof was leaking? She was inside? Where was she? Where am I? Naruto asks. You're in my room. Figured better to take you here than to have you sleep in the training fields. She hears Sasuke's velvety voice reply. She shivers. Sasuke had always had, as her 12-year-old self had once thought, a really cool voice. That was before puberty hit. Now that he was a man, that thing was positively lethal. This was especially so after having an erotic dream. Oh thanks. Your roof is leaking, by the way. She mumbles and tries to hide her blush. The blonde couldn't believe she had had a dream like that, with Sasuke watching. What if she had moaned or something? It didn't seem like she had thought. Sasuke would have said something, if she had, right? Not surprising. I haven't lived here in years. It's likely the entire district needs some repairs. I'll look at the roof later. He says nonchalantly. You can fix a roof? She asks in surprise. I can hold lightning in my hands and yet, somehow it's fixing a roof that surprises you? Sasuke asks. To anyone else, his tone and face would have looked neutral. Naruto knew Sasuke though. He was trying to hide it, but his eyes were dancing with amusement. He was laughing. Well, Sasuke was laughing Sasuke style, anyway. Well yeah, I mean it just seems so domestic and normal. Naruto says. Naruto, which construction worker do you think is going to enter the Uchiha district and be willing to do the job? Most of them think this place is haunted and the ones that don't, are too terrified of me to accept the job. I can manage, he says with a shrug. Eep, this place is haunted? She asks and looks around, as if she expected a ghost to jump out at her. Sasuke shakes his head. Naruto Uzumaki, the woman who had saved the world, was afraid of ghosts. Honestly, He didn't even know how to respond to that. My district is not haunted. Do you think they would have let me stay here, if it was? He asks her. I don't know. I love our village, but they haven't been the best at looking after orphans. She mumbles. I'm sure you'll change that. He offers and Naruto beams at him. He didn't know why she was smiling like that. You would have thought that Sasuke had just given her the world. He'd never understand his blonde as long as he lived. Wait, his blonde? Damn it. Thanks, bastard. That means a lot to hear you say that. She bounds over to him and hugs him tightly and Sasuke lets her. He wasn't the type of person who liked hugging, but he figured he owed it to her. Sasuke sighs and wraps his arms around his former teammate. I don't get what you are so happy about. But you're welcome. He whispers and lays his head on top of hers, inhaling her sweet scent. Because in your own bastardly way, you just said you believed in me. She says as if it was obvious and continues grinning like a fox in the henhouse. Only you, Naruto. Only you, he mutters. Anyway, you hungry? The canned food should still be good. He offers. Yeah, she says and looks around curiously, causing Sasuke to raise an eyebrow. Naruto had never been to the Uchiha district before. She definitely hadn't been to Sasuke's house. And she most certainly had never been inside his room before. At least she thought this was his room. It was so bare though. What is it? He asks. Is this your room? The blonde asks. Yeah, why? Sasuke replies, not at all sure what was going on in the hyper ninja's mind this time. It's so bare. Most people's rooms say something about their personality. But yours is so empty. I know your personality isn't empty. She says, I haven't stayed here since I was 13. Before that, I had other things on my mind, besides decorating. He states in amusement and leads her to the kitchen. He warms them up some chicken noodle soup, deciding that was possibly the only thing she'd eat in the house if she wasn't starving. She could be such a little kid at times. Thanks, bastard, she says, sitting down and eating with him. So what were you dreaming about? He asks as he begins eating. Huh? Oh, I don't remember. I don't remember most of my dreams. The blonde woman lies. He shakes his head. Naruto was a horrible liar. Whatever. If she didn't want to tell him, he wasn't going to press the issue. There were more important things to deal with. Whatever. I hate to admit this, but I'm going to need your help to deal with the council. Sasuke mutters. Naruto blinks. Hell had just frozen over. Sasuke had admitted he needed help again. It reminded her of the time they were genin. Naruto? Sasuke said as they tried to climb up those damn trees using only chakra for the 1000th time that day. Yeah? She asked. Can you ask Sakura how she does it? Her only male teammate, other than her sensei, inquired. Naruto grinned from ear to ear. The mighty bastard was asking for help. This was unbelievable. Oh, she was never going to let him live this down, as long as they lived. Yeah, hey, Sakura, how do you do it? The blonde asked, as she jumps down from the tree she had climbed manually to speak with her friend. Sasuke sighed in relief. Better for Naruto did it. If Sasuke asked for Sakura's help, she'd probably take it as a marriage proposal. At least this way, he'd only have to hear the blonde run her mouth about it. It'd be annoying, but it was kinder than giving Sakura false hope. Okay, bastard, she told me. It's surprisingly easy. Naruto said, once she climbed the tree using only chakra. How did you do that? He demanded. Naruto explained. Sasuke blinked. That was it? Really? It was that easy? Damn, it was so simple that it had become complicated. Thanks, he said and followed the blonde's instructions, to do exactly as she had done. Wow, you haven't asked for help since we were genin. Yeah, sure, what do you need? She asks. This was embarrassing. If it was up to him, he'd rather not talk about it at all. He hated asking for help, especially about something this personal. But really, he didn't have much of a choice. I'm the last of my clan. Despite what happened in the past and how they feel about me, they want the Sharingan bloodline. It's very useful to this village from both a military and prestige perspective. They are going to want me to have kids. He says, but you always wanted to restore your clan anyway. So what's the problem? Naruto replies in confusion. It was hard to picture Sasuke as a father. Him holding a baby in his arms wasn't an imagine that she could easily imagine. Sasuke was anything but gentle and you had to be really gentle with babies. I haven't decided who I want to restore it with yet. They might try to marry me off to someone for the sake of continuing the bloodline. I might not get any say in who. Sasuke explains bitterly. Naruto gasps. Did he really think they'd do something that evil? Damn it, no wonder he hadn't wanted to stay. You don't think they'd actually do something like that? The blonde demands in absolute horror. I don't think. I know that it's a possibility that has likely already entered their heads. It'd be easier for them if I cooperated. Obviously, they'd rather have me marry someone that I found desirable. It'd make it a lot easier on them if I was willing. But I doubt that me being unwilling would actually stop them from forcing a match. Sasuke replies. Danzo is dead though. You killed him. That kind of twistedness is gone now. She says. There will always be Danzos in this world. You can kill one and 10 more will pop up somewhere else. I hate asking you this. But they are far more likely to listen to you than me. He says with a shrug. Yeah, I'll talk to them. Don't worry. That wouldn't be right to force someone to get married and have kids, just because of a bloodline. She says. Sasuke nods. That was awkward. What did you say after that? At the moment, he wished he had Naruto's gift for random babbling. It wasn't something he could ever do though. So I'll head back to my place, go change, and talk to them. She says, once she was done with her meal. Sasuke nods. Naruto does exactly as she said she would do. About an hour later, she was in the council room. Right, so this is going to be awkward. But you aren't allowed make Sasuke marry some woman he doesn't love, just to keep the Sharingan bloodline going. She says, how did you know about that? They demand. Wait, you're saying that you actually were planning on it? Naruto asks and blinks in shock. The council members rub the back of their heads sheepishly. They soon regret asking that question. Naruto tears into them for a good solid hour, cursing them out. She slammed them with every reason why this was wrong ethically and compared them to Orochimaru and Kabuto. Which in her mind, was the ultimate insult. Lady Hokage, you are overreacting. We were simply going to suggest to him that he should start looking for a suitable wife and do what he wants to do anyway. One made the mistake of saying, oh yeah? Well if that was it, you wouldn't look so guilty. I can't believe this. What is wrong with you people? She thunders at them. By this point, a small crowd had gathered outside the building. Everyone could hear Naruto screaming her lungs out. Something had distressed their Lady Hokage, big time. Don't worry about it, I'll go check on her. Kakashi says as he leisurely strides into the building, carrying his ever-trusty orange book in hand. Naruto, what's wrong? Are you aware that you are shouting so loudly, that I cannot dismiss the possibility Gaara will appear because he thinks you are in danger? He asks in a chuckle, only half joking about the Gaara crack. These perverts want to force breed Sasuke, like he's some sort of animal or something. It's sick, she cries out in outrage. Oh boy, this wasn't going to be pretty. Kakashi knew what Naruto was like when it came to Sasuke and knew her strong sense of right and wrong. To Naruto, the world was very much a black and white place. Even Kakashi felt uneasy when the topic of preserving bloodlines through questionable means came up. Naruto would never tolerate such a notion. Well, I'm certain they learned their lesson. Haven't you? Kakashi asks in a friendly fashion and they nod. I damn well hope so. She mutters and heads off with Kakashi. Meanwhile Sasuke heads to the market. He wasn't going to live off of canned goods for the rest of his life. The last Uchiha admirably avoids paying much attention to the stares and whispers. It happened everywhere he went at this point. It was just a fact of life, like the sun rising and setting. Sasuke. Sakura calls out as she makes her way over to him. Sakura. He greets her and turns his attention back to some tomatoes. Tomatoes were his favorite food. He really should try to get Naruto to eat something more than ramen and chicken noodle soup. Seriously, it wasn't healthy. He had no idea how she was so fit with such a poor diet. When did you get back? She asks. Yesterday. He replies simply. Why didn't you come to see me, Kakashi, and Naruto? She asks in a hurt tone of voice. Sasuke being Sasuke, didn't bother to lie. Perhaps, if he had been a more sensitive person, he would have realized he was setting himself up for disaster. But he wasn't and he did. I saw Naruto. We went training and out to get some food. It was too late by the time we finished, to go find you and Kakashi. He says. Oh, well I'm really happy you are back. The pink-haired woman says, trying to cover up her hurt. Damn it, it didn't matter what she did. It would always come back to Naruto for him. She didn't think Sasuke loved her. He just respected her strength. But Sakura had gotten a lot stronger now. She had trained under Lady Tsunade herself. The young woman was a very skilled medic. Her punch could cause craters. She could summon giant slugs. And all that still apparently wasn't good enough to be more than an afterthought to him. That hurt. Thanks. So I heard you were going to end up being the head medic? He asks, trying to make conversation. Yeah, Lady Tsunade says I'm making really good progress. Sakura replies cheerfully. Finally, he was recognizing her as an equal in a way. This was amazing. Maybe she had overreacted when he said he went to see Naruto first. She was Hokage now. It was only natural he'd check in with the Hokage first. That's good. I learned a little medical jutsu while I was traveling. Nothing fancy, but enough stabilize someone until the real medics showed up. He explains. Really? You learned medical jutsus? Wow, I never thought you'd be interested in that. Sakura says, positively beaming to finally be able to share something with him. I'm interested in surviving. It helps to be able to patch yourself up. I can't say that I have a natural talent for it. I probably never would have managed it if it wasn't for my Sharingan. He admits. It wasn't easy for Sasuke to admit that. He hated that he had essentially cheated to learn the new skill. But it was the truth. He believed in assessing himself honestly. Naruto was the optimist. He was the pessimist. Perhaps Sakura was the realist on their team? It had just always been that way, ever since they were assigned onto Team 7 together. Oh well, still. It's really useful to know a little bit of it. I've tried to get Naruto to take it up. But her chakra is just too wild for it. Sakura says with a heavy sigh. You tried to get Naruto to do something that requires control and precision? Have you met her? Sasuke asks with a smirk. Yeah, I guess that's a good point. Why don't we go get lunch together? She asks. Normally, Sasuke would have said no. He hated socializing, but he was hungry. He'd only had soup for breakfast. He shrugs and nods, letting her choose the location. Food was food to him right now. Sasuke didn't care what place she chose throw them to at. Meanwhile, Naruto headed away from the council. They made her so angry. What right did they have to try to force someone into a presumably loveless marriage, just to preserve a bloodline? That was wrong. That was sick. It made her want to punch something. That's when she saw Sakura and Sasuke head towards a romantic cafe. It was a place frequented by couples in the Leaf. She didn't know why, but she felt a sharp pain in her chest at the sight. I told you that you should have marked him. You should have staked your claim earlier. Best go see what she's up to. Kurama tells her. He's my friend. That's all. I don't care if they're dating. I'm happy for them. My two best friends together, that's nice. She lies. You have always been a horrible liar. Go see what the pink-haired one is plotting. I have always scented her desire for your mate. If you don't act quickly, you could lose him. Though thankfully, he's never found her desirable. The Nine Tails muses. Naruto wished that she could resist the impulse to spy on them. But she couldn't. She follows them and cloaks her chakra. She saw that Sasuke ordered a tomato salad and some chicken. She didn't pay attention to what Sakura ordered because the pink-haired woman had placed her hand on his knee. Sasuke manages to politely scoot back, as if he didn't notice the gesture. Which Naruto was sure he did. So where did you go while you were away? Sakura asks. Almost everywhere that I could. I visited the 5 great nations and few island ones. Sasuke replies and bites into his salad once the order arrives. Did you meet anyone interesting while you were away? Sakura asks. Naruto had to resist the impulse to snort. She knew exactly what her female teammate meant by that. She was asking if Sasuke had a lover or was interested in anyone that he met while he was out on the road. She probably thought she was being subtle too. I met a lot of interesting people. Obviously, no one worth staying away from home indefinitely for though. He says and answers the underlying question. Oh well, you never know. She might just be right under your nose. Sakura says with a shy smile. Maybe. Well, thanks for lunch, but I have to repair the roof of my house. He says. It wasn't a lie. He did have to repair the roof of his house. But mostly, he just wanted out of there. While he had grown to tolerate Sakura more than he used to, he didn't want to eat sitting across from her pretty green eyes. He preferred a pair of beautiful blue eyes to be sitting across from him, babbling about, well, everything. He sighs as he heads off. Sasuke knew that his whim was going to get him in trouble one of these days. He couldn't be in love with her. Sasuke tried to rationalize it. Naruto had been the one constant in his life. No matter what he did, she'd always forgive him. The blonde would always come chasing after him, as if he was truly the center of her world. Even after he tried to kill her. Everything I touch turns to ash. One day, she'll see that. He mutters as he heads back to the Uchiha district. Her forgiveness and loyalty was dangerous. He felt like if he allowed himself to indulge in it too much, he'd end up corrupting her. Sasuke didn't want that to happen. It was just one of the many reasons why he had stayed away for so long. He didn't want to hurt her again. But try as hard as he did, Sasuke couldn't resist. He always ended up coming back to her. Naruto hated herself for it, but there was no denying that she felt relieved. She felt relieved when Sasuke left Sakura. It seemed he still wasn't interested in their pink-haired teammate. I still say you should claim him before this becomes a problem. He might not want her, but there is always the possibility that another female will catch his eye. Kurama warns her. The blonde tries to imagine it. She honestly didn't know what kind of woman Sasuke would actually like. He seemed to dislike everyone almost equally. He'd shown romantic interest in exactly 0 people to her knowledge. She couldn't see that changing anytime soon, but he did want to restore his clan. So sooner or later, he kinda had to choose someone. Then he won't have any time for me. She mutters. He'd spend it with his wife and kids. Sasuke was practically obsessed with restoring his clan. She doubted he'd let them out of his sight for even a minute. Even if it was still impossible to picture him rocking a baby, she knew that he was going to do it at some point. After all, he had said so when he was fucking 12 that he was going to restore his clan. Sasuke was nothing if not determined to reach his goals. He always achieved them, although sometimes things didn't work out the way he planned. She sighs sadly as she remembers learning the truth about Itachi. It wasn't fair what had happened to either of them. You know, for a ninja, you aren't very sneaky, Sasuke says, standing behind her with a kunai to her throat. Naruto blinks. Somehow without realizing it, she had followed him. Sasuke must have noticed though. Great, just great. Now how is she going to explain this? Yeah, well there's not much point in sneaking up behind a friend, right? You aren't an enemy ninja. She replies with a smile. True, but next time, it might not be me who notices. It might be an enemy ninja and they might not have an issue with slitting your pretty little throat. Sasuke warns her. Naruto blinks. Had Sasuke just called her pretty? Well, more specifically, he had called her throat pretty. But that still counted, didn't it? You think my throat is pretty? She asks. Naruto, your throat's appearance is not the point. The point is you could have been killed if it wasn't me. Someone might have taken advantage of your guard being down. It doesn't matter how powerful you are. If you aren't aware of your surroundings, bad things can happen. Sasuke tries again to warn her. He sighs and lowers the kunai. She never took anything seriously, other than dragging him back or beating bad guys. She really had to work on that. He thought her becoming Hokage might have changed that, but Naruto was still Naruto. At the end of the day, she apparently thought the world was all sunshine, rainbows, and likely unicorns were also somewhere in the equation. Yeah, I know. A ninja must always expect the unexpected. I'd ask you to lunch, but you already ate. She mutters. You were spying on me and Sakura? Sasuke asks in disbelief. I wasn't spying. I just happened to notice that you were eating lunch together. I'm not blind. The blonde tries to defend herself. So how did it go with the council? He asks, deciding to change the topic. Naruto twitches. God, it made her so angry. They actually thought they could breed him like he was some thoroughbred horse or something. It was sick. It was wrong and it made her see red. Sasuke shakes his head. She had always worn her heart on her sleeve. That's why he knew he had to do something. Sasuke pushes her against a tree and keeps her pinned there. He was not going to let her go QB and kill the council. Naruto, calm down. Whatever it is, you can tell me. Sasuke assures her. They basically admitted you were right. It just makes me so mad. How can they treat a person like some prized piece of livestock that they want to breed? She asks. Because not everyone is as noble as you. They've always viewed ninjas that way, but especially ones from clans that possess bloodlines. It's nothing new. It's something they like to keep out of the public eye, but behind the scenes they do love to try to manipulate such things. He tells her. That's when Naruto's eyes widen. His hair, his Jonin uniform, his body. It was all exactly like in the dream from this angle. Oh God, she had been dreaming about Sasuke. It's you. She whispers and looks at him with stunned, wide eyes. What are you talking about? Yeah, this time they want to treat me like some horse they want to breed, but I'm far from the first. I doubt it's any different than how they would treat Hyuga clan members. Sasuke continues. Naruto blinks. That was supposed to make it better? Was he insane? He just accepted this as a fact of life? She was shocked. Sasuke didn't seem disturbed by this at all. He sounded like he was more inconvenienced than anything. Nothing. Wait, you aren't angry with them? The blonde inquires in confusion because she just didn't understand. About this? No. I knew it was going to happen. Besides, I have you. I know you. You'll talk them out of it. So just calm down. As much as I would love to see you kill them, it isn't worth it. Don't throw away everything that you've worked so hard for me. It's really not worth it. He says. Alright, I still don't like it though. Have you thought about it? I mean, I know you want to restore your clan and everything, but I haven't seen you even look at anyone. She says. Had he thought about it? Sasuke had thought about it almost every day, nearly without fail. But it just didn't work. His eyes were fine. Sasuke admired beautiful women as much as the next man. The last Uchiha's drive was also perfectly healthy. But that was where it stopped. Other than on an aesthetical level, no one besides Naruto could hold his attention. It always came back to her somehow. I've thought about it, he admits. He supposed that he always knew deep down. Well, at least since the age of 12, which frankly was close enough to always to him. Sasuke had almost died fighting Haku. His last thoughts had only been that he couldn't die because he hadn't killed Itachi and of her. Everything else was always about his family or her. Stupid things. He remembered how they always fought at the academy. Sasuke remembered the kissing incident. The day that they had been placed on the same team had flashed across his mind. For God's sakes, he even remembered them competing with each other over who could eat the most food. That is what had been on his mind, as he was positive that he was about to die. So is there anyone? She asks. Yes and no. Come on, it's going to rain. Unless you want to get soaked, you should probably come with me. He says, taking her hand, and teleporting them inside his home. Yes and no? What does that mean? So there is someone? The blue-eyed ninja asks. There's always been someone, but it's not an option. He states as he makes sure the doors and windows were shut firmly. She's not an option? What did that mean? Naruto briefly contemplates the possibility maybe Sasuke was in love with a married woman or something. Who is she and why isn't she an option? The Hokage demands. Naruto, let it go. Sasuke says and flicks her forehead in a small chastisement for her being nosy. Oh hell no. She was not going to let it go. Her best friend was possibly in love and he wasn't even going to try? That wasn't like Sasuke. He never gave up. What was wrong with him? I'm not going to let it go. I want you to be happy. So why aren't you trying to be happy? Why isn't she an option? And again, who is she? The woman inquires once more. Sasuke raises an eyebrow. As usual, she was being stubborn. Well, if she wasn't being stubborn, she wouldn't be Naruto. Because she deserves better. I don't know if you've noticed, but everything I touch turns to ash. He warns her and heads over by the fireplace. Naruto's eyes widen. She had no idea that he felt that way. Did Sasuke really believe that? That he shouldn't be with the person he loved because he was cursed or something? You're being ridiculous. That is completely not true. She protests. It is and you know it. I don't really understand why you want anything to do with me. Do you enjoy being in pain? Is that it? Is that why you chased me so long? Does it make you feel like a martyr or something? He asks. She blinks. Naruto wasn't sure whether to feel insulted, hurt, or just to feel incredibly sad for her friend. She sighs and wraps her arms around him tightly. She didn't know what to say, so she'd just show how she felt. I don't enjoy being in pain. Which is why I don't want to hear you talk like that. You aren't cursed or anything like that. You're a good person, who has had a lot of bad things happen to you. Yeah, you made a lot of dumb decisions. But that doesn't matter now. What matters is you're safe and you're home. She tells him. Sasuke sighs. He almost wished that she would stop doing it. He almost wished that she would stop forgiving him for everything. The last Uchiha knew he didn't deserve it. It really was selfish to give in to it. He knew that she'd be better off if he had just stayed away. Naruto would have been heartbroken. But she would have gotten over it, eventually. As long as she knew he was alive and okay, maybe she could have moved on. But he caved. He came back. I'm not a good person and we both know that. Sasuke says and cries out in pain when he felt a sharp pain to his cheek. Oh, he says and rubs his injured face in shock when he realized Naruto had just slapped him. Yes, you are. Don't say stupid like that, or so help me bastard, I will kick your ass. Then you are going to have a really hard time finding a wife. I mean, your personality is so bastardly, you kinda have to rely on your looks to find someone. She says, you realize that you just contradicted yourself there? How can someone be a good person and have a bastardly personality? He mutters, I don't know, you just are. Stop trying to confuse me and yourself. It isn't going to work. Now you done brooding? I mean, I get that is kinda your thing, but come on. You should be at your brooding limit by now. She says. He shakes his head in amusement. Maybe she was right. As horrible as the past was, it was over. Sasuke knew he couldn't leave again. It would break her. This time he had to stay. He cursed himself once again for coming back. Sasuke wanted to blame those damn foxes, but he knew the truth. He would have come back eventually anyway. He loved her, and that wasn't going to end well for either of them if he acted on it. Maybe you're right. Maybe I'll feel better after a shower. If you want anything to eat, help yourself to whatever is in the kitchen. I did go to the market to pick up a few things. But I got sidetracked with Sakura. He says and heads off, presumably to the bathroom. I got sidetracked with Sakura. Naruto mutters. It was back. The jealousy was back. She hated being jealous of one of her best friends, but she couldn't deny that was what was happening. Are you a girl or a woman? A woman would take advantage of the fact he is about to be naked and it's just the two of you in this house. Kurama taunts her. What, you pervert? The blonde shrieks at the fox demon in her mind for his outrageous suggestion. I'm not the one who was having that dream about being taken by him against a tree. So you are going to be a girl then? You are too afraid to claim your mate. You faced his ancestor without blinking, but cower at the possibility of telling him that you want him. Humans are strange creatures. The Nine Tails continues his taunts. She cuts off the link. One of the advantages about having been aware of Kyuubi's presence since the age of 12 was that she now had some control over when their exchanges ended. She could effectively tune him out if she really wanted. The fox could override it, but apparently this took a lot of energy and most of the time he didn't feel like bothering. Naruto now knew that Sasuke was the man in her dreams. Why she didn't see it before, she wasn't sure. Maybe her subconscious had suppressed it because she wasn't ready to deal with it. Doesn't matter now. He's in love with someone else. She mumbles. The blonde, for the life of her, couldn't figure out who. It probably wasn't Sakura. Sasuke hadn't really been looking at her with longing. From what he said, he should be looking at this person with at least wistfulness. But there had been nada at that lunch. Still, that left the question, who had caught his eye? Did she even know that Sasuke liked her? Probably not. Sasuke had never been good at sharing his feelings. He was right when he said they communicated more through their fists than their words. Well, she's definitely got to be a ninja. That much is for sure. She decides. Naruto honestly couldn't picture Sasuke being attracted to a civilian. A civilian definitely couldn't handle him. Even if Sasuke tried to be gentle, she imagined he was a vigorous lover. He probably fucked like he fought hard. And you call me the pervert? I thought you were more of a romantic than that? I would have thought you would go with a more idealized description of, like, making love? Kyuubi observes. It seemed the furball couldn't resist making a comment to that particular thought. Kurama was her friend, but sometimes it would be nice to have a little privacy in her own head. Shut up, you perverted fox. She grumbles. I'm not the one that was musing over how roughly the Uchiha prefers to mount his female. Kurama replies and retreats further back into her mind, apparently feeling rather pleased with himself for that little zinger. Meanwhile, Sasuke sighs as he gets in the shower. Naruto knew that he was in love with someone. She'd be like a dog on a bone now. The blonde was the most stubborn woman he had ever met. She likely wouldn't stop until she got an answer. He briefly contemplated lying. Sasuke quickly dismisses the thought. She knew him too well. The blonde would likely see through that in under a minute. Besides, who could he name? She'd never believe Sakura or Ino. Tenten is still grieving over Neji. I doubt she'd believe that I fell for Hinata because we haven't even spoken 2 words to each other. Damn it, he mutters. It was pathetic. He had wanted to return her hug. But he couldn't. If she gave him an inch, he knew that he'd probably take the mile. Why couldn't life have been simpler? He briefly imagines how things might have been different if his family had lived. I still can't believe you married a blonde. Fugaku says and shakes his head at Sasuke in amusement. Fugaku. Makoto says warningly and places her hands on her hips. I'm only teasing the boy. When is she due back from the office? He inquires. Sasuke shakes his head in amusement. He informs his parents that Naruto usually finished paper pushing by 5 or 6. So she should be here soon. Sasuke, it's not very nice to refer to her Hokage duties as paper pushing. Itachi chides him gently. It's okay. That's what I call it myself. Naruto says as she comes bounding through the door. Sasuke smiles smugly and walks over to his pregnant wife. He wraps his arms around her and kisses the top of her head. For some reason, he strongly suspected it was going to be a girl. You are glowing, Naruto. Makoto greets her daughter-in-law with a smile. Thanks. I wasn't really glowing so much this morning. Morning sickness is not fun, she says and snuggles into Sasuke. It'll pass. I remember when Makoto was expecting Itachi. For a couple weeks, she barely left the bathroom. Fugaku says with a chuckle and earns a glare from his beautiful wife. Someone is barely going to leave the couch if he keeps it up. She warns him and Fugaku gulps. After eating, Sasuke and Naruto head home. They made love and Naruto fell asleep. Sasuke held his blonde against him protectively and drifts off to sleep with her. If only things were that easy. He mutters and was suddenly really glad for cold showers. His little daydream had ended in rather vivid detail. Sasuke was definitely not going to risk taking care of that problem with Naruto in the house. He knew his luck. With his luck, she'd walk in on him. They'd both be mortified. She'd probably call him a pervert and start throwing things. Then they wouldn't be able to look at each other in the eyes for weeks afterwards. How she had trained under 2 major perverts and still kept her innocence was beyond him. Better face the music, he mutters as he gets out of the shower. Sasuke quickly dries off and throws on some clothes. He heads back to the living room, where he sees Naruto had curled up on the couch. He raises an eyebrow. Bastard, it's raining cats and dogs out there. I'm not going anywhere, she says. It'll clear up, he says and then smacks his forehead when he hears the loud clap of thunder. Or not, she says and the power goes out. This is ridiculous. Fireball jutsu, he says and blows a fireball into the fireplace, providing some light for them. She sighs in relief. Naruto really hated the dark. As long as she had some light, she didn't mind a bad storm. Though she kinda wished Sasuke had fixed the roof a little earlier. I guess it's worse in the living room. You can sleep in one of the guest rooms if you want, he says. Alright, thanks, bastard, she says and saunters off. For a moment, Sasuke was memorized by the swaying of her hips. He was reminded of the dream. He idly wondered how fast she cold moved those hips and then smacks himself mentally for it. Those thoughts would only lead to the need for another cold shower. It was pointless to torture himself in such a fashion. He sighs and heads to his room. It was going to be a very long night. Naruto finds one of the spare rooms and flops onto the bed. Thankfully, it had windows and it was still daylight. So she wasn't in the dark. She knew no one had slept in this room for years because of all of the dust. That didn't matter to her though. What mattered was she was in the same house with Sasuke. Sasuke was back in the leaf. After years of being away, he was home. It seemed like he was going to stay for good this time too. He wouldn't be talking about repairing the roof, if he was just going to leave again, would he? She asks herself. If you are that worried about him leaving again, you could give him a good reason to stay. Kurama suggests. Like what? She asks, her earlier annoyance at the fox forgotten when she realizes he might actually have an idea. You want him. He clearly wants you or he wouldn't have been watching your backside so closely. The solution is simple. Kyuubi continues. Naruto blinks. The crazy old fox had lost it. Sasuke hadn't been staring at her ass earlier, had he? There was just no way that Sasuke would do something like that. It was, well, very much not like him. He wasn't looking at me that way. She protests. Yes, he was. Now as I was saying, he wants a family. You happen to be a fertile female, who is of age. The desire is there between both of you. He'd stay for that. The urge to den is powerful. He's smart enough to realize that traveling with a pregnant woman, let alone a small child, is difficult. He'd want to re-establish roots. The Nine Tails finishes. The blonde couldn't really disagree about that. If there was one thing that would definitely get Sasuke to stay, it would be a child. But he wouldn't want to have a kid with her. He was in love with someone else. Clearly, someone that he viewed as being unobtainable. though she got the impression that was based almost exclusively on him being too hard on himself. He'd already atoned for his sins. Sheesh. He was the real martyr, not her. Yeah, he wants them. Just not mine. She mumbles. Who wants what? Sasuke asks, having come to check on her. Oh nothing. Just talking to Kurama. You know how he never shuts up. She says nervously. Sasuke raises an eyebrow. Honestly, he didn't know much about her relationship with the fox demon. He knew that they could communicate with each other and she somehow had become his friend, but not much else. No, not really. You never really tell me what he says. Though it does explain why you space out so much. I just thought you were an airhead before I knew that you had him inside you. Sasuke says with a shrug. You bastard. She says. Now, I know you are having conversations with a demon. Maybe it was better when I thought you were just very easily distracted. He says with a laugh and Naruto twitches. That was it. She lunges at him and pins him to the floor. Sasuke looks up at her with an arched eyebrow as if to say, yeah, you got me pinned. We both know you aren't going to do anything. So you might as well let me up. Well, maybe that was Naruto projecting her own thoughts onto Sasuke more than anything. She knew that the last Uchiha was far from the most expressive person in the world. But she didn't care at the moment. She just had to prove him wrong somehow. She just didn't know how she was going to do that exactly. Naruto had pinned Sasuke before. But this time was different somehow. She blamed Kurama mostly for putting those perverted thoughts in her head. But mostly, she knew the real reason. They weren't little bickering genin anymore. She was a grown woman, with a very much grown man underneath her. If anyone walked in on them now, it would look incredibly suggestive. She was contemplating how to punish Sasuke for being a bastard. She felt him try to move her off of him. That didn't exactly go as planned. Fuck, Sasuke groans. NHH. Naruto couldn't help but agree. Her clothed womanhood accidentally brushed up against him. She gasps when she felt him pressed so intimately against her and heard Sasuke groan. If it felt this good with clothes on, she wondered what skin-to-skin contact actually felt like. She could feel her face heating up at the thought. Naruto wasn't really thinking straight. It was all just so hypnotic. She could feel him underneath her. The blonde was surrounded the scent of pine trees, sandalwood, summer rain. The rain and trees she understood. They lived in the leaf village and it was pouring outside. The sandalwood though, that was Sasuke's natural scent. But mostly, it was those ruby red eyes. Don't leave me again, okay? She whispers into his ear and she felt Sasuke nod. I wouldn't have come back this time, if I wasn't going to stay. He tells her and could feel him glide his hands along her back. Naruto closes her eyes and sighs in pleasure. It was such a strange sensation. The gentle caresses were equal parts sensual and comforting. It almost felt like he was trying to comfort her. Sasuke smiles. She was just so cute at the moment. It almost looked like she was actually a fox who was enjoying being petted. He blamed it mostly on the whisker-like markings on her cheeks. Whatever the reason, for a moment he forgot about everything else but her. You might be Hokage now, but you've never been able to keep me pinned. He murmurs as he reverses their position and claims her mouth with his own. He saw Naruto's eyes fly open in shock. Sasuke was vaguely aware of her making a muffled sound of surprise. But as she wasn't actively protesting, he decided to sat his curiosity. They had kissed twice before. But both times had been brief and accidents. He hadn't really had a chance to determine if he liked kissing her or not. Now he did. This wasn't an accident. This time he could explore. Oranges. She tasted like oranges. It was a natural and pure flavor. He decided he liked it. Her lips felt soft against his. He sets about exploring her mouth with his own, his tongue trying to coax hers to dance with his own. He didn't know the act of kissing could be so erotic. You are such a cocky bastard. Naruto murmurs between kisses. The blonde could feel him smirk into the kiss. It was hard to process, but Sasuke was kissing her. He was really kissing her. This wasn't like before. It wasn't an accident and apparently, the last Uchiha knew exactly how to kiss her in a way that left her desperate for more. Where had he learned how to use his tongue like that? Oh fuck it. Who cared? It just felt really good. She tries to return the favor and moans when that seemed to just make him kiss her harder. I never claimed otherwise. He says as he breaks the kiss and he blinks when he realizes what he had just done. Sasuke had just kissed Naruto. He could pawn this one off as an accident. It had been too long and too passionate for that. The last Uchiha had spent years trying to deny that he loved her or at least not act on it. And all that just went up in smoke in 5 minutes. Damn it. Well, if I had known you could kiss like that, I wouldn't have minded so much. She pants. What could he possibly say now? There was no denying it anymore. She knew. There was no real going back. You've gotten a lot better since our genin days. He says and tries to move off of her. Naruto wasn't having any of that though. She didn't know what caused Sasuke to kiss her. But she wasn't going to let him run away from whatever this was. She grabs him by the hand as he was getting up and pulls him onto the ground. Quickly she gets on top of him and straddles his waist and holds him down, by wrapping one hand around his throat. Naruto, I'm not sure if you are trying to seduce me or strangle me. Sasuke mutters. Maybe a little of both. You can't just kiss someone like that and then try to walk off. She protests. Sasuke knew that it was probably very unhealthy. But part of him was kind of turned on by the show of force. Almost no one could actually present a threat to him. Naruto was one of only a few people that, at this point, she might be the only one who could possibly beat him in a battle. He'd always had the advantage though. He was willing to fight dirtier than her. I wasn't going to leave the village. I promised that I wouldn't. I just needed some time to think and I can't focus on anything else when you kiss me. Sasuke admits. So when you said there was someone, you meant me? She asks. Yes, he was willing to fight dirtier than her. Right now he proved that by arching against her. He still couldn't believe he had gotten an erection from kissing and a little bit of accidental touching. But he had. Sasuke figured that would shock her off of him. Yeah, that worked. Naruto blushed as red as a tomato and jumped off him. Sasuke smirks. Sometimes it was good to be the evil one in the relationship, if you could call it that. Good night, Naruto. He says and turns to head off. Answer the question, bastard. She growls at him. You know if you are trying to win him over, screaming insults at him probably isn't helping. Though the fact he was aroused does work in your favor. Even if you won't admit it verbally, the attraction is still there. You could fight dirty, Kurama suggests. Naruto wasn't sure what Kyuubi meant by fight dirty. But she was almost positive it was more than a little further than she was ready to go. Naruto, sometimes you really have to learn when to let things be. I told you my reasons. Look how many times I've hurt you. Don't let me do it again. He says. Kyuubi, what did you have in mind? She asks. Madara Uchiha was once my host. In that time, I learned quite a bit about the Uchiha clan. One thing in particular is that they all have birthmark. The birthmark is extremely sensitive. Almost nothing arouses an Uchiha faster than having it touched. He explains. A birthmark? She'd never noticed a birthmark on him before. She wondered if Kyuubi was just pulling her leg. Why would touching the mark get him going? Still, if it got his attention, that was good with her. Yeah, but I don't know what it looks like or where it is. She points out. His is located on the back of his neck. It's dark blue mark in the shape of teardrop. Kurama tells her. I swear if you are lying about this, I'm going to kick your furry ass. She warns him. Naruto races up behind Sasuke. She brushes the dark hair away from the black of his neck and blinks. Kyuubi was right. There was a little blue dot. She probably never would have noticed it before, if she wasn't looking. Wondering if this was going to work, she lightly brushes her lips against it in a gentle kiss. Sasuke groans and she could feel his body relax against hers. Wow, the fox demon was actually right. This shit really worked. Do you know how much trouble you could have saved me, if you told me he had an on button years ago? She demands. You were too young to make good use of it. Enjoy, he states and retreats further into her mind. Come on, bastard, let's talk about this. I mean after everything, you kinda owe me at least that much. Right? She asks and kisses that spot again. Sasuke shivers. He never knew that spot was so sensitive before. God, that felt good. He resisted the urge to purr like a fucking cat. She was right though. He knew she was. Sasuke had hurt her so many times. He couldn't not at least give her an explanation. But he knew if he did, she was foolish enough to try to pursue a relationship with him and that wouldn't end well. Alright, we'll talk about it later. It's late. We should both get some sleep. Maybe we can talk about it tomorrow, after you get done with your cage duties for the day? He offers. You are stalling, bastard. She growls and Sasuke shrugs. There was no point in denying that. But do you promise, we'll talk about it? You aren't going to run off, try to avoid me, or distract me? She asks. I promise. He agrees and Naruto sighs, nodding. She knew Sasuke. He was almost as stubborn as she was. It probably wouldn't be good to try to start a relationship, after fighting for hours about when they were going to talk. Still, that didn't mean she couldn't give him something to think about. She takes a few steps forward and stands on her tiptoes and pulls his head down. He'd gotten really tall in the past couple years. He now was a head taller than her. But that wasn't going to deter Naruto. She kisses him. Naruto, don't. I'm trying to do the right thing for once. He murmurs after returning the kiss. The blonde wasn't going to be dissuaded that easily though. She rubs the back of his neck and smirks. His eyes were still the ruby red of his Sharingan, but they were darker somehow. Smoldering, she guessed was the right word. She couldn't resist playing with her new toy. Apparently all she had to do to get Sasuke to be more cooperate was touch the birthmark on the back of his neck. Who knew? This was going to be fun. Damn it. He growls and pins her against the wall. She giggles. It was fun to watch him lose control like this. This was way better than fighting with their fists, and she had the upper hand in this case. She touches his mark again. Naruto, I'm warning you, stop that. Sasuke says. Why? You like it and you're much more fun this way. She asks, innocently. I don't know why, but it's driving me crazy. And if you don't knock it off, I'm not going to be able to control myself. Sasuke admits. Alright, I'll stop for now. Night, bastard. She grumbles and Sasuke lets go of her. Night, Naruto. He says and walks off. The next day, Naruto sighs and heads to her office. Normally, she was always happy to go there. But today, she couldn't focus. She was too distracted. The blonde had to try to figure out what to say to Sasuke. He actually wanted her. The blonde was having a hard time processing that. He had spent years trying to run away from her. But she couldn't forget the way he kissed her or the feeling when they touched in far more intimate way than they had before. Well, if found you in his bed, laying there naked, I believe instinct would take over. Humans make things far more complicated than they have to be. Kurama offers. I don't think Sasuke is dumb enough to fall for that. But thanks for the birthmark tip. It really helped. She replies. Lady Hokage? The case cage has just sent a letter, requesting your presence in the Sand Village as soon as possible. He says it is important. A member of her ANBUS says. Oh right, thanks. Tell him I'll be there in 3 to 4 days. Might need some time to pack. She says. By the time the letter got to him, you'd already be there, Lady Naruto. The Anbu points out. Oh right, sorry, wasn't thinking straight. I guess I am a little distracted by the heat today. She says. The Anbu seems to accept this small white lie. Even if he didn't, he at least left. Naruto sighs in relief. She glances out the window and blushes when she saw the trees, remembering her dream. Meanwhile, Sasuke sighs. He decides to go actually finish his shopping. He needed something to do while he waited for Naruto. He had only just gotten back in the leaf, so he wasn't on missions yet. So it would have to do. God, how he hated shopping. He hated going to the market and being stared at. But at least, it gave him something to do besides remembering the night before. It was only moderately successful. The images of the previous night kept flashing across his mind. Naruto, I'm not sure if you are trying to seduce me or strangle me. Sasuke muttered. Maybe a little of both. You can't just kiss someone like that and then try to walk off. She protested. It had always been like that between them though. They'd die for each other, but they also wanted to kill each other at the same time. Sasuke supposed it was just a natural reaction. Their personalities couldn't be more different. For God's sakes, even their chakra was designed to be an explosive combination. His primary first element was of course fire. As it was for most Uchihas. Hers was wind. Wind just fanned the flames. This won't end well. He murmurs as he looks over some of the fruits at the various stands. Sasuke tried. He really tried. God knows he had tried. The last Uchiha had done everything humanly possible to sever their bond, short of actually killing one of them. But it never fucking worked. He knew he'd end up hurting her again. Sasuke always did, but he couldn't get the kiss out of his mind. She was his everything. Oh, I assure you those are fine apples. It will end very well. One of the sellers says. Oh yeah, I'll take them, he says and buys a basket. He liked apples well enough. But mostly he bought them to prevent it from going around that he was talking to himself. It was hard enough reintegrating back into the Leaf Village without people thinking that he was actually crazy. No one had ever gotten under his skin like she had, short of Itachi. And that was only because he was under the incorrect impression he had murdered their family for nothing. As an academy student, they had fought like cats and dogs. It hadn't gotten much better as genin. They still fought like cats and dogs now that he was a jonin and she was the Hokage. Maybe if I get some ramen, she'll be more willing to listen. He says and stops by the ramen shop on his way home. He didn't understand how anyone could consume that many noodles. But Naruto was Naruto. He knew that even the laws of nature went the window when it came to his blonde. He knew it should disturb him that he had just thought of Naruto as his. She wasn't. Sasuke wanted her to be, and it seemed like Naruto felt the same way. But could he really do it? Could he be with her and risk hurting her again? Maybe this time would be different. Itachi was dead and the sins of the past had been laid bare. There was no reason for him to leave. Maybe Sasuke knew he didn't deserve her. But the more selfish part of his personality didn't care. He loved her. Maybe that would keep him from being a bastard, as Naruto always called him. Sasuke, are you here? Naruto asks a little later when she got home from work. Yeah, I got you some ramen. It's still warm, he offers awkwardly. Naruto wasn't sure if that was Sasuke's version of being romantic because he knew how much she loved ramen or his way of trying to let her down easy. She nods though and follows him to the kitchen. Neither seemed entirely sure what to say or do. So we are going to the sand tomorrow. Gaara apparently must really want to see me. I don't know what's wrong, but it must be something big. It's not like him to send out a request like that. She says, oh, I can help you pack, if you want. Sasuke suggests. You have to pack your own stuff. You are coming with me. You are not getting out of this that easily. You sneaky bastard. Naruto grumbles. Sasuke nods. He knew one way or another, he was going to end up going. Which wasn't a particularly pleasant though. The last Uchiha was sure that Gaara had a less than favorable opinion of him. The dark-haired ninja couldn't blame the Cage for this. His own opinion of himself was less than sparkling. And he deserved every bit of judgment he got. He had fucked up royally in the past. Right, so I'll go pack. He says and heads to his room. She grumbles and follows after him. Sasuke didn't see it coming. He got tackled by a flying blonde. Naruto? What the hell? He asks. You said we would talk about it after I got back. You promised. She says. Well yeah, but then you said that we had to pack for the sand tomorrow. Make up your mind, he says. Naruto informs him they can do both. Sasuke simply nods his head. It was very hard to argue with a hot blonde, when she had you pinned to a bed. I'm not a complete idiot. I can tell that you wanted me yesterday. How long? She demands. A while. Sasuke admits and tries to flip them. Naruto had decided to put her foot down though. Sasuke was idly impressed with how firmly she had him pinned down. Yeah, he wasn't going anywhere. How long is a while? She asks. Depends on what you are asking. If you're asking how long since I've known that I liked you, that's one thing. If you are asking how long I've known that I wanted you, that's another. He answers. There's a difference between like and want? That makes no sense, she says in confusion. She'd never understand what went on in Sasuke's head. Apparently, he'd made up some very confusing arbitrary distinctions. But the blonde was never a person who gave up easily. She decided she was going to get some answers out of him, one way or another. Yes, there is. There's a difference between liking someone and wanting someone. He says, and to prove his point, he grinds his arousal against her inner thigh. Naruto squirms. Alright, that made more sense now. Maybe there was a method to his strange classifications after all. Well, how long have you felt both ways, I guess? She replies. Since I was 12. When I thought that I was dying during the fight with Hiku, I thought about you more than I thought about killing Itachi. As for the other part, it's embarrassing. But since I was 15. He answers. Wait, you liked me and you still left? You wanted me and you left again? She demands. Sasuke sighs. He knew she wouldn't react well to that. He had to find a way to explain his reasoning to her. I had to kill Itachi. He had killed everyone else that I cared about. I wanted him gone. I wanted to make sure the next time I had a family, they'd be safe. So yes, I did both times. As much to protect you as to kill him. It didn't work out the way I planned. He says, and his eyes darken in sadness, remembering Itachi. Oh, well I guess in your own bastardly way, you were trying to protect me. So I'm not mad, she says. Good, so you going to get off me now? He asks. No, we aren't finished. I don't think I had a specific moment. But I know the what moment was recent. It was when you pinned me against the tree. I have been having this dream. It was, well enough to make pervy Sage blush. But I could never figure out who my lover was. Only that he had dark hair and wore a Jonin uniform. When you pinned me from that angle, I realized it was you. She mumbles. Sasuke chuckles. He didn't think that Naruto would be in denial longer than him. That was actually funny. Well, it was funny in a very messed up way. I never expected that I would be the one to admit my feelings to myself, before you. You've always been an open book. He murmurs. Yeah, well, stranger things have happened, I guess. I am sorry about Itachi though. I really am. It's horrible what happened to him, to you, and the rest of your family. That won't happen again, I promise, she says and kisses him. Sasuke kisses back. Fuck it, he gave up. There was no way that he'd be able to resist her, now that he knew what her kiss felt like. Well, her kiss when it wasn't an accident. You can't promise something like that. You don't know what will happen after you're gone. But I appreciate you saying it anyway. He whispers after ending the kiss. If they try it after I'm gone, I'll come back as a ghost and haunt them. Naruto says and Sasuke snorts in amusement. She blinks. She didn't know that he could snort. Well, you learn something new every day. Like the fact that apparently Sasuke had been lusting after her for years. Oh, I'm sure they're just trembling with fear. Sasuke snickers. That's right, they damn well should be. I will do it too. I mean it, believe it, she says. Sasuke smiles. He leans up slightly and kisses her. God, he loved her. He loved her because she was delusional. She was delusional to believe that everyone deserved a happy ending. The blonde actually thought somehow that she could fix this fucked up world. And while he knew that wasn't accurate, she made him want to indulge in that fantasy anyway. That's why he loved her. That's why he smiled as she kissed back. 4 days later, they arrived in the sand village. Gaara offered to let them stay at his home. Since he was the case cage, it likely would have sparked an international incident to refuse, so they accepted his offer. Good thing we have 2 guest rooms. The redhead says. Oh, we only need 1. Naruto says with a smile. Gaara was a smart person. He translated that immediately. Naruto wanted to share a room with the Uchiha. The same man who had tried to kill her and who she had spent years chasing after he deserted the Leaf. He respected Sasuke's abilities as a ninja, but he still didn't trust him. It must have shown on his face, because Sasuke glares at him. The case cage knew that he was also glaring daggers right back at him. Lightning crackled between the 2 men. Fortunately, Naruto seemed oblivious. Sasuke's never been to my home before. How about I give him the tour while you begin unpacking? Gaara suggests. Alright, Naruto replies and heads off to do exactly that, unaware that the redhead had just set a trap for Sasuke. Sasuke sighs and smacks his forehead. God help him, but he loved that oblivious woman. She honestly couldn't see what the case cage was trying to do. Oh well, he'd just have to deal with Gaara on his own. I'm sure you know what I'm about to say. Gaara begins and Sasuke could only nod. I know. Save it. You're right. I don't deserve her. I tried to tell her that, but she won't listen. You know how stubborn she is. The Uchiha launches a preemptive strike. Gaara sighs. He would give Sasuke that one. Naruto was the most stubborn person on the planet. The Uchiha was the only person who even come close to being as stubborn as Naruto. Oh, believe me, I know how stubborn she can be. But I doubt you resisted very hard. We both know how strong you are. Still, I think it's only fair to warn you, if you hurt her again, I will end you. I don't care what it takes. I won't allow it to happen again. Do you have any idea how much pain you put her through? The redhead demands. Sasuke frowns. He couldn't tell if Gaara was acting as a protective friend or as someone who was in love with the blonde. It was Gaara. He was hard to read at the best of times. Do you love her? He asks suddenly. I love her. However, I am not in love with her. In some ways, I love her more than you do. I never abandoned her. You did. Honestly, I don't know why she has given you so many chances. Were I in her position, I wouldn't have. The case cage continues. The Leaf Village sighs and looks down. He couldn't argue with Gaara. Deep down, he knew the other man was right. Anyone else would have given up on him, a long time ago. But not Naruto. Naruto was in a league all her own. I know. This time, I want it to be different. He whispers. Against my better judgment, I believe you actually mean that. But it's not up to me to decide that. Go speak with her. I doubt you actually need a tour. You seem to have a good sense of direction. God knows you managed to stay lost long enough. Gaara mutters and heads off. Naruto heads to the room she was going to share with Sasuke. She forms a few clones to speed up the process. Hopefully, Gaara and Sasuke were getting along. She wanted her, well, whatever Sasuke was to her and other best friend, to get along. Good job. I still suggest laying naked on the bed. He'll get he point. He's not an idiot. Kurama comments. Shut up, you damn pervert. Naruto screams and Sasuke walks into their room. He raises an eyebrow. The blonde blushes as red as one of his beloved tomatoes. Damn it, she had said that out loud, hadn't she? Do I even want to know? Sasuke asks dryly and Naruto shakes her head vigorously. Alright, we'll leave it at that then. Well, Gaara gave me the standard warning. You hurt my friend and I'll kill you, kinda thing. Since you asked if we could share a room, it didn't take a genius to figure out what was going on. You aren't exactly subtle. Sasuke muses. Where's the fun in being subtle? She asks with a grin and Sasuke just smiles as he pins her against the wall. He honestly had no idea what he was going to do with her. She was just too endearing sometimes. Sasuke places a chaste kiss to her forehead. Good point. He muses and caresses her cheek. While Sasuke was enjoying Naruto's adorableness, the blonde was having a discussion with Kyuubi. Thankfully, he seemed unaware of this. Damn perverted fox. If you want him to do more than kiss your forehead, you are apparently going to have to be more direct about it, or did you want to remain unclaimed for your entire life? He taunts her. Shut up. Naruto growls at him and didn't realize she had actually growled out loud. Sasuke blinks. Had Naruto just growled at him? Yes, she definitely had. He didn't understand why. It was unexpectedly erotic, but he didn't know why she was upset. Naruto? Sasuke asks uncertainly. Sorry, it was Kyuubi. She mumbles in embarrassment and Sasuke nods understandably. So bastard, you want me to rub the suntan lotion on you? I mean with your skin, you are going to burn really easily. Naruto offers and dispels the clones. Sasuke was going to say he was a ninja. He didn't need suntan lotion. That's when he looked down at his arm. It was already starting to turn pink. Damn it, apparently he did. That was embarrassing. Yeah, probably a good idea, he says, and Naruto smiles, reaching into the traveling pack to pull out a tube of the lotion. She applies it gently to his face. Sasuke closes his eyes to prevent it from getting on them and irritating him. So that was why he didn't see it coming. Naruto grins like a Cheshire cat and pushes him onto the bed. Quickly, she straddles him. Sasuke was now laying on his stomach. The blonde swiftly tugs off his shirt and begins applying it to his muscular back. Sneak. Sasuke mutters and then sighs in pleasure. That actually felt glorious. Her hands gliding over his back and rubbing in the lotion. He could feel her soft-clothed breasts brushing up against him as she moved up and down to thoroughly coat him. You like it though. You are practically purring like a cat. I mean, I knew your clan had ninja cats, but I didn't think you could actually purr. She says and giggles at this newfound knowledge. I do not purr like a cat. Sasuke protests. Oh really? She says and places a light kiss to the birthmark. She laughs when Sasuke whirled around and pinned her underneath him. Yeah, she should thank Kyuubi. That birthmark thing really worked. Hell, if she had known about this earlier, things would have been so much easier. You know what that does to me. That's not fair and you know it. He says. Maybe not, but it works, she says with a smile and arches against him. I can't really argue with that. He murmurs and captures her lips in a heated kiss. It felt so good to be able to kiss her. He didn't have to hide how he felt anymore. He deepens the kiss and remembers how badly he used to be tormented by keeping that a secret. He had seen her. After years of successfully avoiding his former teammate, he had seen her. Sasuke had seen Naruto. The last Uchiha had also run into his other former teammate, Sakura. That didn't matter to him though. It didn't matter much that they had replaced him with some watered-down, anorexic copy of himself either. He saw Kakashi wasn't with them. That was strange. But none of this really mattered. The only thing that did was her. Come to think of it, didn't you want to be Hokage? All that time you spent chasing me would have been better spent training. Don't you think, Naruto? He asked. What good is being Hokage if I can't even save my friend? The blonde replied. Sasuke didn't show it outwardly, but on the inside that shook him to the core. Why did she have to say things like that? Why did she have to be so good? Why couldn't she hate him? She should. He had given her every reason in the world to do so. But she just wouldn't. Naruto wouldn't let him cut their bond. God knows, he had tried. Sasuke failed every single time. He had been so relieved when he left with Kabuto and Orochimaru. He couldn't bear to see that look of hurt in her blue eyes. That had always been his Achilles heel. If Naruto had found him that night, he might not have left. Sakura's sad face he could resist. It hurt him to do it. But she wasn't Naruto. Well, Sasuke, how did it feel to see your old team? It seems they replaced you. Kabuto asked him. Sasuke just shoots Kabuto a glare. He didn't need to hear it. Not tonight. Not after he had seen that look. He sighed and headed to his room. It had been happening more and more lately. Part of him was tempted just to leave. He might be able to get back into the leaf. Naruto would accept him back. He'd apologize. He'd kiss her. And then they could just forget about all this. Maybe they would get married and have lots of children. He'd come back to the leaf eventually. The Akatsuki wants the 9 tails. They'd have to. Then I could kill him. He muttered. Was he strong enough though? Sasuke didn't think he was. He wouldn't do it. He wouldn't get close to her and then risk losing her again. He had to get stronger and kill Itachi. Then maybe, if she forgave him, things could be better. For now though, he couldn't let her see how much those damn blue eyes of hers affected him. She moans into the kiss and returns it. Her toes curl in pleasure. So this was the real reason she had chased him so hard. Subconsciously, she must have known deep down this was what she wanted. In a strange way, she would always be that kid that saw another lonely child sitting by the lake. She had been so happy to finally have someone else that could understand her. Even if he had glared at her when he noticed her, it still counted. Wow, she murmurs and breaks the kiss. Yeah, he agrees and caresses her cheek. You really mean it this time? You won't leave again? Because I don't think I could handle it. I can't lose you anymore. She admits. I mean it, Sasuke says and rolls over until he was laying on his side, pulling her against him. He'd never be able to erase the past. But maybe he could make the present and future better. Sasuke holds her tightly and kisses her cheek. Naruto sighs in contentment. It felt nice to be held. The blonde snuggles into him. The blue-eyed ninja wanted so desperately to believe him. Despite everything, she couldn't remember a time when Sasuke had actually lied to her before. Maybe he did mean it. Night, Naruto, he says and kisses the top of her head, before closing his eyes. Night, Sasuke, she mumbles and soon drifts off to sleep in his arms. A few hours later, Sasuke woke up to a gorgeous sight. Naruto was standing up. Her back was towards him. Clearly she was in the process of getting dressed. He could see her slender back, her elegant curves, and wide hips that spanned out into a firm backside that was clad only in a black lacy, semi-see-through thong. Her lovely long legs were also on display. But what got his attention most was the fact she was currently topless. Sasuke was suddenly very glad her back was towards him. He quickly tries to hide his nosebleed. If she had flashed him once during any of their battles, he would have lost instantly. But rather happily. Those were a work of art. They deserved a shrine. Tsunade's might be bigger, but Naruto's were large and perky. He tilts his head and glances. They were also crowned by rosy pink nipples. You have an audience. Judging by the look on his face and his scent, he likes what he sees. He points out, "Are you just going to stare at me all day, bastard? Or are you actually going to do something?" Naruto asks. There's nothing wrong with admiring the view. But since you asked so nicely, I think I'll do something about it. He says and pulls her back down onto the bed. Kurama, shut up. You're ruining the moment and I really didn't need to hear that about Sasuke's ancestor. She protests. Thankfully, Sasuke seemed obviously about her conversation with Kyuubi. She'd never live it down. The blonde couldn't believe that had just happened. They had actually made love. And if she had known it would have been like that, she would have just pranced around in front of him naked sooner. You alright? I didn't hurt you, did I? Sasuke asks. Bastard, I told you that I'm a ninja. I can handle anything you throw at me and that includes your really big sword. She exclaims. Sasuke shakes his head in amusement. His sword? Really? Well, at least it was a really big sword. We just had and you can't even say the word? You said it earlier. He reminds her and his eyes dance with unshed laughter. That's not the point. She stammers and blushes as red as his Sharingan. You're adorable. You know that, right? He asks and lays down on the bed, pulling her with him. Sasuke wraps the blankets around them. He wasn't entirely sure what Gaara had wanted them to come to the sand for. But at that moment, he didn't care. He was perfectly content to lounge in bed all day with Naruto and enjoy the afterglow. And if she was up for it, maybe try out a few things that he had heard about in his travels. Really? She asks and Sasuke nods. Well, it's about time you noticed. She says smugly and lays her head on his chest. I always noticed. I just didn't want to say anything before because it wasn't safe. He murmurs. It wasn't safe. Safe as in protection. Oh. Naruto gulps. They hadn't used the jutsu. She wasn't on anything. Sasuke definitely hadn't wore any protection. Damn it, Naruto? Sasuke asks in concern, seeing her panicked expression. Oh, it's nothing. Just wondering what Gaara wanted us to come to the sand for. She lies. I'm sure he'll tell us. Relax. He tells her and gives her a gentle kiss before stretching out in a satisfied lazy way that reminded Naruto of a lion. A lion that might have just restarted his pride. It was just one time though. She'd be smarter next time. They'd known each other forever, but they had only just gotten together officially. Sasuke wanted to restore his clan though. Maybe he would be happy if she was pregnant? He couldn't leave her if she was. Sasuke wanted a family too badly to do that. You're right, she agrees. I should have said this before, but I do love you. I know I haven't acted like it, but I do. He tells her and kisses her forehead, before shutting his eyes and drifting back off to sleep. I love you too, bastard. She mumbles and snuggles into him. She decides not to worry about it. The odds were low and she wouldn't be able to tell for a while anyway. Besides, Sasuke was such a comfortable pillow, it was hard to worry about, well, anything. She soon falls asleep with a smile on her face. Naruto smiles. She never figured him for a cuddler. But Sasuke Uchiha was apparently a cuddler. A really devoted one. She sighs in pleasure and snuggles into her sleeping lover's arms. This was nice. She felt cherished and safe. Sasuke was also very warm. Sometimes she wondered if it was because he was from a fire clan or maybe he had just elevated his body temperature slightly from harnessing lighting so much in battle. Either way, she didn't care. She'd never need an electronic blanket again. I wonder what he'd say, if I was. She whispers to herself. He had always wanted to restore his clan. Sasuke would probably be happy, right? It wouldn't make sense for him not to be. Logically, she knew this. But tell that to the massive metaphorical colony of butterflies that had decided to take up residence in her stomach. You're worried over nothing. The Uchiha is not ignorant. He is well aware of how babies are conceived. If he truly did not want to sire any, he would have asked you to use the jutsu or taken some other precautions. Stop being foolish, Kurama tells her. Yeah, but we got really caught up in the moment. Who knew that Sasuke would pounce just because he saw me topless? She asks. She vaguely wonders if the sight of any shirtless woman would have triggered a similar result. The blonde fucking hope not. The thought of him touching anyone else, the way he had her, made her blood boil. Mine, he mumbles in his sleep and pulls her closer. Naruto smiles. She was being ridiculous. As far as she could tell, Sasuke hadn't even looked at another woman. There was no need to get jealous. The blue-eyed woman places her hand on her stomach. It was far too soon to tell. Even a chakra test wouldn't be able to detect any changes for at least a few days. Still, there was a chance, however slight, that she might be carrying his baby. Their baby, she mentally corrects herself. I wonder if it would matter to him, if it was a boy or a girl. She muses. I doubt it. The Uchiha wants to restore his clan. He probably wants many children. I'm certain by the laws of probability, he realizes that sooner or later, he's likely to get sons and daughters. Kurama reasons. Geez, wait to take all the fun out of it. She huffs. She tries to imagine what Sasuke would be like with a kid. Picturing him with something as fragile as a baby just wasn't working. Academy age was easier. Maybe he'd carry their child on his back, like Itachi had done for him? Naruto did remember the elder Uchiha brother doing that a lot. Sasuke had seemed to enjoy it. Maybe he'd do the same. That would be so cute. Well, I see your urge to den is intact. The Nine Tails observes. Shut up. She grumbles, not wanting him to ruin her little fantasy. It was too late though. Just like that, the thread was lost. She sighs and goes back to snuggling into his arms. It had been fun while it lasted. An hour or so later, Sasuke wakes up. He smiles. That was a nice sight to wake up to. A hot naked blonde curled up against him like his own personal kitten. He smiles and kisses her forehead. Sasuke looks at the clock. Yeah, he was probably going to have to wake her soon. The last Uchiha was surprised that Gaara hadn't already come looking for them. It was already 10:30 in the morning. Naruto, he says gently. He shakes his head. She was sound asleep. Naruto, unlike most ninjas, could sleep like a rock. Sometimes he really envied her ability to do so. He gently nudges his lover. Yeah, no dice. Sighing, he quickly writes a note and places it where she could see it. The Uchiha manages to get out of the bed without waking her and takes a quick shower before getting dressed. It was time to face the redhead. Uchiha. Gaara greets him once he makes it to the kitchen. Gaara, he says simply. Where is Naruto? The cage asks and looks around as if he expects to see her come bounding in. She's still asleep. Naruto had never been a morning person. I tried to wake her, but it was hopeless. He says with a shrug. The redhead nods. Truly, he envied her ability to sleep so deeply. Most ninjas had trained themselves to be light sleepers while on missions. You never knew when you might be attacked. But not Naruto. What did you need to come here so badly for? I know you. You aren't prone to panic. If you asked Naruto to make a 3-day journey to your village, it's for a good reason. Sasuke asks. I'd rather not have to repeat myself. We shall simply wait for her to wake up. Uchiha, I don't want the details. But please tell me that you were at least smart enough to use protection. Naruto was rather vocal during your coupling. So were you for that matter. Gaara mutters in annoyance. Sasuke really hoped that he wasn't blushing. He wasn't ashamed of his relationship with Naruto or for anyone to find out that they were lovers, but he was far from an exhibitionist. Gaara would be far less likely to take him seriously, now that he had overheard that. The cage had future blackmail material and he likely knew it. Glad you don't want the details. You aren't getting them and that's really none of your business. Sasuke snaps at him. Naruto is my friend. My best friend. It damn well is my business, Uchiha. Gaara hisses at him. Meanwhile Naruto wakes up. She reaches over for her Uchiha. The blonde frowns when she didn't feel him. Her eyes opened and she blinks when she saw he wasn't there. That's when he noticed the note. Naruto, I tried to wake you. But you were sound asleep. I went to find Gaara. We should probably see what was so important that he needed you to come here immediately. Sasuke. She frowns. The blonde was a little upset that it was so plain. Not that she ever expected Sasuke to be the type to write a love letter. But a love, Sasuke would have been nice. She sighs and hops off the bed. The blue-eyed woman quickly dresses. She decides to check the kitchen first. That was where 2 male ninjas would likely be. Fighting had a way of increasing your appetite. That's when she noticed her lover and best friend were fighting. I'd rather not have to repeat myself. We shall simply wait for her to wake up. Uchiha, I don't want the details. But please tell me that you were at least smart enough to use protection. Naruto was rather vocal during your coupling. So were you for that matter. She hears Gaara say. Naruto blushes as red as a tomato. Gaara had overheard them? That was embarrassing. Well, she supposed that it only made sense. They hadn't really tried to be quiet. But still, Sasuke was Sasuke though. What she heard next made the blonde gulp. These two were really going to go at it, at this rate. Glad you don't want the details. You aren't getting them and that's really none of your business. Sasuke practically roars at him. Naruto is my friend. My best friend. It damn well is my business, Uchiha. The cage replies, apparently not intimidated in the slightest at the Uchiha's less polite response. Guys, stop fighting, Naruto says as she darts into the kitchen. He started it. They both cry out at the same time and Naruto giggles. The cage and a former S-class criminal ninja were arguing like they were still in the academy. It was funny in a twisted way. She couldn't help but laugh. I don't care who started it. Gaara, I'm with the bastard now. Bastard, be nice to Gaara. I want my 2 best friends to get along. Naruto says. Gaara raises an eyebrow. Naruto could be strange sometimes. Why would she make love with someone she called bastard? I can't disagree with the accuracy of calling him that. But why are you with him in that case? The redhead couldn't help but ask. Well, he may be a bastard. But he's my bastard, you know? The blonde replies with a smile and leans into Sasuke, who wraps his arms around her and smirks at Gaara. The cage didn't take too kindly to that smirk. He was tempted to try to see if he could sand coffin the last Uchiha, without accidentally sucking Naruto into it. He decided it wasn't worth the risk though. So Gaara, what's up? Why all the secrecy? What's the big secret? The blue-eyed woman asks, trying to lessen the tension in the room. We have reason to believe that the daimyos are planning something. Quite simply, they don't like how influential the cages and other war heroes have become. This is especially true when it comes to you. Gaara says with a heavy sigh. Naruto blinks. The daimyos were plotting against the cages? No way. Why would they do that? It didn't make any sense. The cages managed the ninja villages, which were the heart of any daimyo's military power. What makes you say that? Sasuke asks. Mei found a cobra in her room. The same week that diplomats from the daimyos came to visit to her. Cobras aren't naturally found in her nation. It had to be an assassination attempt. Gaara answers. Naruto's eyes widen. Someone had tried to kill Mei. But Mei was great. Sure, she was a little too desperate to get married, but other than that, she was a powerful ninja and a good friend. Why? That is suspicious. You are going to need more than that to accuse a daimyo though. It's circumstantial at best. The last Uchiha reasons. I know. That is why we haven't said anything about it yet. But I needed to warn Naruto. Obviously, I couldn't put such a thing in a letter. Even coding was too risky. The redhead continues. Why me especially though? Naruto asks. Because you're the hero of the war. You're beloved Naruto. Not only are you Hokage, but many people worship the ground you walk on now. Most people have neutral opinions of the daimyos at best. If you wanted to, you could take everything from them and they know it. Sasuke explains. Naruto frowns. She had never considered such a thing. She was Hokage. The blonde had Sasuke. She had amazing friends. The blue-eyed ninja would never have to worry about things like money, considering her salary. There wasn't anything else she needed. Why would she challenge the daimyos? I don't want to be a daimyo. I'm perfectly happy with what I have. The young woman says. They don't know that though, Naruto. Sasuke whispers. In any case, I wanted you to be aware of the potential threat. You should stay in the sand for a few days. If you came all the way here and left immediately, they would likely be suspicious. We can always make up a plausible excuse for why I needed you. Gaara continues. The blonde nods. Yeah, that'd probably be better. Besides, she wasn't really eager to walk all the way home. She felt a little sore from last night. Idly, the blue-eyed ninja wonders if she could have conned Sasuke into carrying her bridal style. She giggles at the thought. Naruto, what are you giggling about? Sasuke asks in confusion. He didn't find anything amusing about this current situation. I'll tell you later, she promises. In any case, that is what I wanted to say. And Naruto, are you sure you want him? He has a less than stellar track record in the past. Gaara glares at Sasuke. The woman sighs. She could already tell that Sasuke and Gaara were going to be butting heads for a while. Naruto appreciated that the redhead wanted to protect her. She did, but he needed to learn to trust her judgment. She wasn't leaving her bastard. That being said, Sasuke needed to learn how to be nice to someone besides her. I want him. You two need to learn how to get along. You're both my most precious people. I don't like seeing you fight. She puts her foot down. And I don't like you becoming involved with someone who has hurt you so much in the past. I worry for you, my friend. That's all, Gaara says. Sasuke twitches. What really irritated him was that the cage wasn't saying anything that wasn't true. He had hurt Naruto in the past. He'd hurt her a lot. The last Uchiha knew that he didn't deserve her. Yet, Naruto still accepted him anyway. You're right, I have hurt her, but I'm not going to do it again and it's not your decision to make. Sasuke growls at the other man. He even growls like a rabid dog. The redhead mutters. Naruto rubs the back of her head sheepishly. Yeah, she was going to need to get those two away from each other. Maybe they'd find a way to bury the hatchet later. But she wasn't going to let them bury each other in the meantime. Well, since we are going to be here for a while, might as well explore the sand. Sasuke, you want to go for a walk with me? She asks. Better than an inquisition. He mutters and heads with the blonde. Gaara sighs. That could have gone better. He was only worried for Naruto's happiness. He didn't trust the Uchiha at all. But at the moment, there was nothing he could do about it. Besides, there was a chance he could prove him wrong. Sorry about that, she mumbles once they were down the street. It's alright, he's right. I deserved that and a lot worse. Sasuke says and Naruto sighs, kissing his cheek. Maybe, but it doesn't matter. You're better now. You aren't like how you were before. You're back to being the real you and that's all I care about. The real you who can do amazing things with your mouth, by the way. She adds with a cheekily smile. Sasuke couldn't help but smirk at that last part. That was Naruto for you. She always knew how to cheer a person up. I'm glad you liked it. He says and pulls the blonde into his arms for a tight embrace. Who wouldn't? She asks and blushes, content to snuggle into his arms. Neither of them noticed the sand villagers who were out on the street had caught them in their lover's embrace. Everyone that did was staring. But that didn't matter to Sasuke or Naruto. To them, they were the only two people in the world at the moment. Of course, something had to ruin the moment. A ball went flying. Sasuke managed to catch it before it smacked them in the face. A little kid looks at them with wide and terrified eyes. Clearly, he recognized who his ball had almost hit. Sasuke shakes his head in amusement. He tosses the ball back at the kid, who darts off. Well, you have to give them this much. The sand produces some fast villagers. Look at that kid go. Sasuke muses. Naruto nods. Yeah, that was one fast kid. She felt a little bad though. The boy was so scared. She knew why. He was scared of Sasuke. The sand villager just didn't know him like she did. Yeah, he's fast. Naruto agrees. Anyway, I guess that will teach us a lesson. It's not a smart idea to stand in the middle of a street. Anywhere you want to check out first? He asks. Naruto pauses. She didn't really know. Did the sand even have a ramen shop? Oh well. They could just explore and see what they could find. Not sure. Wonder what's in there though. She inquires as she sees a store that had the name Suna's Secret written across the top. Naruto, wait, not that one. Sasuke says and he sighs. She nods and heads off with Sasuke. The blonde was getting pretty hungry. She knew if they kept walking around, sooner or later they'd find a place that sold food. For now, she was just content to be with him. Finally, he wasn't running away from her. Sasuke wasn't after revenge. He was just being Sasuke. That made her happy. So what are we looking for? He asks. Somewhere to eat. I'm starving. The blue-eyed ninja informs him. I have no idea where you put it. You must have the fastest metabolism that I have ever seen. Sasuke muses. The Hokage does something rather undignified. She sticks her tongue out at her lover for that comment. Sasuke seems to find it amusing. He smirks and pins her to the side of the nearest building, kissing her. Don't stick your tongue out if you aren't prepared to use it. He warns her, after breaking the kiss. Naruto blushes. There was something really suggestive about the way he said that. Who knew that Sasuke had an actual drive? You learn something new every day. I'll try to remember that. Oh look, a bakery, she says happily and darts off. Sasuke shakes his head. Naruto was like a little kid. She got excited over the smallest things and she never sat still. He sighs. Sand follows after his lover. Well, privately he didn't mind that much. You couldn't beat the view. Sasuke watches with amusement as Naruto buys a lot of sweets. He didn't recognize half of them. It amused him that one of the strongest ninjas to have ever lived had such a sweet tooth. You want anything? Naruto asks cheerfully, not realizing that Sasuke was having a grand old time watching her act like a kid in a candy store. Do they have any strawberry muffins? I like those. He asks. Sasuke did like them, but mostly he figured he should get something. Naruto might feel a little self-conscious if he didn't. She nods and gets him some muffins. The two of them sit down at a booth. He nibbles at his meal and once again wonders where she put it all. It had to be Kyuubi's influence. He was sure of it. But yeah, I really hope you and Gaara can patch things up. She says. He's just being smart. I can't really blame him. Gaara wants to protect you. If I was in his position, I'd probably do the same thing. But that doesn't mean I have to like it. He'll get over it, eventually. After all, if he went from being a homicidal maniac to a devoted cage, I can go from what I was to being, not what I was. He finishes. Naruto sighs. She didn't know if he'd ever really forgive himself. But she wasn't going to let him go back to brooding. Sasuke was a really good brooder. He was like a cage-level brooder. So she knew when she had to nip that in the bud. She leans over and kisses him. Sasuke kisses back. He could taste lots of frosting in her kiss. It made him feel like a kid again. Well, that was until he felt her try to seduce him with her tongue. That's when his inner child went out the window and his adult self very much wanted to play a different kind of game. That's better, she says after breaking the kiss. What's better? Sasuke asks in confusion and was wondering why she had stopped. You were starting to go on a major guilt trip of yourself there. So I stopped it. You really need to stop torturing yourself over what happened. It's over. You're back. That's all that matters. The blonde explains. He shakes his head in disbelief. Sasuke had every reason to torture himself. He deserved far worse. But it was Naruto. She really did believe in fairy tales endings. The fact that he was back was all that mattered? He'd never understand her. But God help him, he loved her more than anything. You're way too forgiving. Just be careful. Gaara is right. There is a target on your back. Unlike me, you aren't immune to most poisons. That would be my first guess for how they'd try to take you out. They know they can't beat you in a fair fight. So they'll try something sneaky. Her lover says, wait to kill the mood, bastard. We were making out and enjoying some cupcakes and you had to bring up assassination attempts. She scolds him. Sasuke rolls his eyes good-naturedly. She wasn't taking this seriously. It was a damn good thing she had him around. He'd keep her safe. Naruto was an amazing ninja on the battlefield. But when it came to things like stealth or strategy, well, not so much. She was a fearsome warrior and a fantastic lover, but Naruto just didn't operate on that level. She wasn't capable of thinking like a cold-blooded killer or deception. Naruto, you need to take this seriously. Sasuke warns her. I am taking it seriously. I'm just not going to jump every time I see a shadow. Besides, we won the war. We can handle a couple of sneaky wannabe assassinations. She informs him. He nods. Sasuke hoped she was right. He couldn't afford to lose her. Not everything they had been through. It's nice to know you are worried about me though. Naruto says. She smiles as she remembered the first time she knew he cared. Well, at least a little anyway. It was Sasuke after all. She remembered being tied to that damn pole. Kakashi had tricked them and told them not to eat. Sakura and Sasuke were sitting next to her. Here, eat, he said and lifted the food up to her. Sasuke, what are you doing? If Kakashi-sensei finds out. Sakura exclaimed in a panic, not wanting to get caught violating the rules. Sasuke shook his head. Naruto could see that he was trying to come up with some excuse. Sasuke never did anything nice. He needed an excuse for it. He came up with a good one though. If she's weak from hunger, it will impact our team as a whole. We won't get those damn bells. He muttered. Yeah, I guess you're right, Sakura said and held up the food for Naruto as well. Naruto smiled. There was just one problem. She couldn't use her hands. The blonde would have to be hand-fed. Suffice to say, her pink-haired teammate had been less than thrilled. Just do it. We don't have time to waste. Kakashi will be here any minute. Sasuke reminded Sakura. Sakura grumbled, but she did as Sasuke said. That was until Kakashi showed up. Sasuke and Kakashi got into it. The Uchiha had said something about the three of them being one. Naruto was actually afraid for her teammate's safety at that point. Then suddenly Kakashi's entire demeanor changed. You pass, he said with a smile. Wait, what? They all asked. It's true that in the ninja world those that break the rules are scum. But those who would abandon their friends are worse than scum. Their sensei explained. You're smiling because I'm worried that you might be assassinated? Naruto, you make no sense sometimes. He mutters as he bites into a muffin. In some ways, you haven't changed that much since we were genin. Remember, when you tried to feed me, even though Kakashi-sensei told you not to? She asks. Sasuke raises an eyebrow. Yeah, he remembered. He didn't particularly see what that had to do with their current situation. But he had long ago given up trying to understand her thought process. Yeah, so? Her lover inquires. You tried to brush that off too. You like to pretend that you don't care, but you do. Deep down, way deep down you are a teddy bear. You care. You just don't like to show it. She beams. Sasuke gives Naruto a look. The kind of look that said quite clearly she might as well have grown a second head. He'd never understand. I love you, but you are really weird sometimes. He muses. I love you too, bastard. The blonde tells him. Meanwhile back in the Leaf, the council was hosting a secret meeting. The Hokage was gone, so they could speak privately. That was exactly what they needed to do, given the current situation. She'd never let us arrange a match. We'll have to be subtle about this. The only way we'll know that he can be trusted is if he has a permanent tie to the leaf. If Sasuke ever wants to betray the leaf again, he might not mind being hunted and having to face an entire village, but he wouldn't endanger his child. It's our best insurance, a council member says. The female council member frowns. That was true. Naruto would never allow them to formally arrange a marriage. But they could still help nature take its course more in more subtle ways. It might be easier just to find a suitable woman and drug him with something to increase his desire. If she gets pregnant, he'll probably marry her out of obligation, and even if he doesn't, he'd still have a child to consider. She offers. A third council member considers this. He wasn't entirely sure that would work. He knew that Sasuke was immune to most poisons. Would Orochimaru have built up his immunity to drugs that would increase one's drive? He didn't know. Too risky. We don't know if such a drug would work or if the woman would even get pregnant the first time. If she didn't, Sasuke wouldn't fall for the same trick twice. He mutters. He might loathe Sasuke Uchiha, but the man wasn't an idiot. No one could doubt that he was a perceptive individual. No, they would need another plan. That's a good point. Well, we can't do the direct approaching. Drugging him probably wouldn't work. So what are we left with? The female council member inquires. The first council member ponders the question. He didn't really like it. They were the council, not a matchmaking service. But he supposed it couldn't be helped. We simply have to find a woman who would appeal to him. He states. They all sigh. That was like finding a needle in a haystack. None of them had even seen the Uchiha look at a woman. Still, they did have to try. It was for the safety of the village, after all. Meanwhile, Sakura had just finished up at the hospital. She decides to go and visit Naruto. She frowns when she realizes her teammate wasn't there. Oh, you won't find her. She left with Sasuke a few days ago to go to the sand. Not sure what for, but it seemed urgent. Kakashi has been on standby in case anything happens. Sai says as he slinks over to her. The pink-haired woman blinks. Naruto just left, without telling anyone? Well, apparently she must have told Kakashi and Sai, but not her? How'd you find out about that? The medic demands to know. I saw them leaving when it happened. They were carrying gear that was clearly meant to travel to the desert. It didn't take long to figure out where they were going. What did you need to see her for? He asks cheerfully. Sakura shivers. She still wasn't used to it. Sai's smile hadn't lost its creepy edge. She hoped one day that he'd be able to smile, without making her think he was secretly plotting to kill her. Root had really done a number on him. I just wanted to visit my friend. She replies. Oh, I don't doubt that. But mostly, I think you wanted to visit her to see what is going on with Sasuke. The dynamics of your team were horribly out of whack. You wanted Sasuke. She wanted to be acknowledged. Sasuke just wanted revenge. He's back now, but you don't know how to reconnect with him. He observes. The medic rubs the back of her head sheepishly. She hated to admit it, but Sai was essentially right. Though Sasuke had certainly acknowledged the blonde now. Sakura had no idea how he really felt about her. As your friend, I would likely advise that it's better to stop pursuing him. Their relationship is strange, but don't think there's any doubt that their own very eccentric way, they love each other. Sai offers. The leaf woman blinks. He couldn't be serious? Sai thought that Naruto and Sasuke were in love? The two ninjas were many things to each other, but they were definitely not in love. They were teammates. Naruto and Sasuke were friends. They were rivals. But love? They weren't in love. Naruto had even said the reason why she never gave up on him was because they were friends. I really don't think they like each other that way. She mumbles. How else do you explain him not killing her? He's had ample opportunity. She was the main obstacle to his goals. He has never hesitated to kill before. He always comes back. He comes back for her. I doubt Sasuke is even consciously aware of this. I know Naruto is rather dense and probably isn't aware of it. He muses. Sakura shakes her head. Sai was out of his mind. He just didn't understand. That was all. Besides, neither of them were the shy type. If they were in love, one of them would have said something by now. Naruto was no Hinata. If you don't believe me, you should ask Sasuke himself why he came back. He's always been a rather blunt sort. Don't you agree? Sai offers. He didn't want to see her get hurt. Sai knew what was coming. It was really better to give her some warning now. That way it wouldn't come as such a nasty shock. Alright, when he gets back, I'll ask him. Sakura says, determined to prove Sai wrong. Back in the Sand Village, Sasuke and Naruto finish up at the bakery. They head back to Gaara's place. The blonde could tell that her lover was a bit uneasy about returning. Don't worry about it. Gaara will get used to the idea after a while. She assures him, I'm not worried. I just don't want to deal with him glaring at me. Sasuke mutters. Liar. She says with a giggle and darts inside with Sasuke darting after her. Sasuke had always been fast. Naruto found out how fast though when he manages to tackle her playfully to the floor. He smirks victoriously, once he had the blonde underneath him. It's not nice to call people liars. You should apologize. Sasuke commands and Naruto squirms. Sasuke had her in a pretty firm pin. There was no way she was going to wiggle out of it. She would have to flip him. The blue-eyed ninja tries to do exactly that, but growls in frustration when she realizes the Uchiha wasn't budging. Come on, bastard. Let me up, she whines. I don't know. I kinda like you, right where you are. Sasuke whispers hotly into her ear. Naruto shivers. There was something very suggestive about the way he said that, and he was using his bedroom voice. She wondered if he used that on purpose or if it just happened naturally. I'm not sure how happy Gaara would be if we did it on his kitchen floor. She says, that's just a bonus, but I guess you are right. That and it's probably more comfortable on a bed than the tiled floor. Sasuke says, getting up, and helping her up. Bad Sasuke. She chides him and heads towards their room. You started it. He mutters and follows the other ninja to their bedroom. She couldn't really argue that one. Once they were inside, she shuts the door and kisses him. She'd never get tired of this. Sasuke kisses back and pushes her onto the bed. Idly, the leaf villager noted that Sasuke was apparently very good at pouncing when he wanted to be. The lion metaphor was really apt. She wondered if he would grow a mane like Madara had one day. She giggles into the kiss as she imagines that. What are you laughing about? Sasuke asks and raises an eyebrow, not at all seeing what was so amusing about kissing. Just I was wondering if you would ever grow your hair out like Madara. She replies, honestly. And look like a porcupine? He asks in disbelief. Well, the back of your head currently looks like a duck's backside. She observes. Sasuke twitches. Had she really just said that? Did she just compare his hair to a fucking duck? No way. A very wide duck though? She eats when she saw Sasuke twitching. Sasuke twitching usually didn't end well. He had a pretty explosive temper. She gulps, knowing that he was probably going to want revenge for that crack. Sasuke being well Sasuke immediately sets about getting even. He finds her foot and slides off her sandal. The dark-haired ninja proceeds with tickling her without mercy. Sasuke. Stop that. She laughs hysterically. I will after you take it back. My hair does not in any way resemble a duck. He says and continues with his tickling, knowing that Naruto had to be the most ticklish person on the planet. That's not fair. She laughs and tries to squirm away, but it was futile. Sasuke gives her a look. It very clearly said what he was thinking. She was foolish if she expected him to play fair, ever. Do you think I care? He asks and continues tormenting his lover's foot. Alright, you win. It doesn't look like a duck, even though it totally does. She replies. You really aren't helping your case. He muses. Oh come on, what if I wear the high heels? Will you stop then? She asks. Sasuke thinks about it. After a minute he nods and lets go of Naruto. The blonde bounds off to retrieve the shoes. Besides, you're one to talk. You'd still be wearing pigtails if it wasn't for me. He says smugly. What's wrong with pigtails? She demands. Nothing, if you're an academy student. He says with a shrug and smirks as he watches Naruto bristle. He couldn't help it. She was hot when she got mad. Teasing her was simply too much fun to resist. You keep this up and I'm getting the cuffs. I'm warning you right now, bastard. She says as she joins him on the bed. I'm not sure if that's a threat or a promise. Sasuke muses. I could cuff you, get you really worked up, and then just leave you there. Maybe that would teach you not to make fun of a girl's pigtails. She warns him. Sasuke gulps. He wasn't entirely sure if Naruto was bluffing or not. He decided he really wasn't that eager to find out. That sounded painful. Fine. I'll stop teasing you about the pigtails. He murmurs and caresses her cheek. Good, that's better. she says triumphantly and snuggles into his chest, wrapping the blankets around them. Sasuke chuckles. He wraps his arms around her. He really hoped that Naruto never let anyone know that he was a cuddler. His reputation would never recover. But it was nice to be able to hold her this way. So Sasuke? She asks a bit nervously. That got Sasuke's attention immediately. Naruto didn't do nervous. Ever. She always charged right and fearlessly. Something had her spooked. Yeah? He asks, not at all sure he liked where this was going. Speaking of academy kids, the blonde trails off, not sure how to say this. Sasuke raises an eyebrow. He gives her a look that clearly said to go on. He wanted to hear whatever had her so skittish all of a sudden. A few moments ago they had been play fighting and now she looked half ready to bolt. Well, we didn't use the jutsu and yeah. She continues. You're trying to say you might be pregnant? Sasuke says. Naruto nods. She watches for Sasuke's reaction. Yeah, he wanted to restore his clan. But he had never specifically said with her. Their relationship was also really new. So she really wasn't sure. I'm not exactly a medic, but study some medical jutsus on my travels. So I know enough to realize it's a little too early to tell either way. But if you were? Sasuke turns her question right back around at the nervous blonde. I mean, it depends how you would feel about it. She replies. Sasuke shakes his head in disbelief. He kisses her forehead. The last Uchiha takes her hand in his. Naruto, I love you. I want to restore my clan. Do you really think I'd be upset if you were pregnant? It'd be sooner than I would have expected, but it's what I want. If that's what you want, I won't force you into it. He tells her. So you'd be okay with it then? She asks. I'd be more than okay with it. Now get some rest. It's a long journey back to the leaf. Sasuke says and wraps his arms around her, indulging in more cuddling. Yeah, Naruto replies, and she couldn't disagree with that, so she decides to do exactly that. For years, she had chased him everywhere. It was still a shock that he'd actually voluntarily snuggle up to her like a contented house cat. A house cat that could turn into a lion at a moment's notice, she noted with a smile as she shuts her eyes. Sasuke soon joins her in the land of dreams. He woke up in the morning and stretches. It was rare that he could sleep without a nightmare. He knew it had to do with the fact that Naruto was by his side. She was his own personal dream catcher. Go back to sleep, she mumbles and pulls him back down on the bed, apparently not happy to have the source of her warmth leave her. Naruto, we have to get up. It's early morning. We can get a few hours in before it gets super hot. He tells her. Somewhere in the back of her mind, she knew he was right. Sasuke was being perfectly logical. But a much bigger part of her would rather just lounge all day in bed with her Uchiha. Do we have to? She mumbles and opens her eyes. It'd be better than starting off when the sun is at its highest, yeah. Sasuke tells her in amusement. Damn it, I guess you're right, she says and hops off the bed, quickly changing in front of him. He'd already seen everything anyway. The blonde decided there was no point in being bashful. Her back was towards him, so she didn't see the smirk on his face. Contrary to popular belief, Sasuke was just as capable of being playful as anyone else. Besides, who could resist a target like that? He smacks her ass. Eep, Sasuke. She squeaks and jumps about 2 feet in the air. Sorry, couldn't resist, he says with a smirk. That might leave a bruise. You bastard, she grumbles. Sasuke pushes her against the wall and kisses her. It was amazing how she could completely seduce him and make him feel like a genin again, all at the same time. That was Naruto though. I could kiss it better if you like. He offers. Perverted bastard. She accuses him. You like it though. I'll go pack our stuff and we can head out. He says as he leaves the room. Naruto blushes. She couldn't really deny that she did like it. But like hell if she was actually going to admit that. Sasuke's ego was big enough already without her adding to it. 3 days later, Naruto and Sasuke arrive back in the leaf. Was it Naruto's imagination or were women hitting on Sasuke even more than was normal? Maybe she was just being possessive. They were lovers now. That hadn't been the case before they left. So about those high heels? Sasuke whispers into her ear, once he had made a tactful escape from yet another woman who had just hit on him. HMPF. About those women. Naruto mutters and turns her back on him. Sasuke raises an eyebrow. Naruto was jealous of women that he wanted nothing to do with? It'd almost be funny if it wasn't denying him of the undoubtedly gorgeous sight of the blonde in those shoes. Maybe he'd be able to talk her into wearing the maid outfit as well? I don't know what's wrong with them. They're acting even more insane than normal. That is saying something because the women in the leaf have always been psychotic to begin with. He mutters. Excuse me? Naruto says. Sasuke sighs. He realizes that he had just made the situation worse. Damn it. He pauses for a few seconds trying to figure out a way to wiggle out of this hole that he had apparently just dug himself. I didn't mean you, Naruto, I meant them. You would think that they would have noticed that I have never been interested in them by now. The possibly last Uchiha says with a shrug. Naruto glances back at Sasuke. She knew that he was right really. The normally somber ninja had never even smiled at any of them. The blue-eyed woman knew she was being a bit ridiculous, but she couldn't help it. That had to be the fourth or fifth woman to flirt with Sasuke today. This is getting kinda weird. I mean, you've always had admirers, but this is crazy. The blonde offers. A little, yeah. Doesn't matter though. I don't want them. Sasuke says simply and pulls Naruto into his arms, teleporting them back to the Uchiha district. Sasuke smiles as he felt Naruto relax in his arms. Apparently, she just needed some privacy and to be away from the banshees. Yes, that is how Sasuke viewed his admirers. God, they were so loud. There, that's better. No more banshees, he says. The Uchiha didn't mind loudness from his blonde though. He was used to it really. Actually, Sasuke encouraged Naruto to be as loud as she wanted when it came to their more sensual activities. Banshees? His lover asks with a giggle. There was a difference between his blonde's loudness and the banshees. Naruto didn't shriek or wail in an annoying high-pitched voice. She just got overexcited. Sasuke could handle someone being excited. Someone shrieking in a high-pitched voice that made his ears feel like they were bleeding? Not so much. That was just not why. They scream like them. Come on, let's get inside. It's been a long trip and I want to get out of these clothes. Sasuke mutters as he walks towards his house, with his hand wrapped around the blonde's back. Naruto smiles and heads inside with her lover. Maybe she was just overreacting. Though if they didn't back off, she wasn't going to be held responsible for her actions. I can help you with that, she says with a cheeky grin. I'm sure you could, Sasuke says with a smirk as they enter his house and Naruto spend a rather pleasurable night with her lover. Naruto smiles in the morning and snuggles into him as she wakes up. Who knew that Sasuke had a thing about lace? He really seemed to enjoy the maid outfit. She'd never seen him look so relaxed as he did at that moment. Apparently agreed with him. The blue-eyed ninja tries not to laugh as she realizes that maybe all that Sasuke needed was to get laid. Naruto, what are you laughing about? Sasuke mumbles sleepily as his eyes slowly open. Oh, it's nothing. I gotta go. Hokage stuff to do, she says with a smile. You're Hokage. Play sick and stay with me. Who is going to reprimand you? Not like the daimyo is going to notice if you skip out on paperwork for one day. Sasuke muses and wraps his arms around her, kissing her neck. That was really tempting, but she couldn't cave. She knew that enough time had passed now that a pregnancy could be detected. So she wanted to know as soon as possible. The blonde knew she didn't conceive last night. They had used the jutsu. She'd been surprised when Sasuke insisted on it. Her lover was taking this whole potential assassination thing very seriously. The implication was clear. If she was already pregnant, she suspected he was probably going to go into super overprotective mode. But if she wasn't, he wasn't keen on the idea of getting her pregnant with potential assassins lurking around. Which she understood, it was only logical. You know that I can't do that. Don't tempt me, evil bastard, she says with a smile and kisses him. Sasuke kisses back. He rolls his eyes in amusement at the nickname. Some things would never change, he supposed. Alright, so do I have any missions today? Sasuke asks. No, you can just stay here. I don't want to hear about another woman trying to molest you in the middle of the street. She grumbles. It's cute that you are jealous, in a disturbing way. You'd tell me if the reverse was happening, right? He asks. She tilts her head to the side. Naruto was pretty sure that Sasuke was asking if she would tell him when guys hit on her. Yeah, there was no way in hell that she would do that. No, you'd shove a Chidori through their heart or something. The blue-eyed ninja replies and Sasuke shrugs. He couldn't deny that. Sasuke figured that Naruto was joking, but he likely would do that. It had taken him years to really admit to himself that he loved her. Now that he didn't feel like sharing. "You know me too well," he mutters. "You aren't even going to deny it, are you?" The Hokage asks incredulously and Sasuke shakes his head to show that he wasn't going to deny it. Naruto blinks. Sasuke was a little scary sometimes. The blonde wondered if he was actually serious or just joking. She honestly couldn't tell. It was Sasuke after all. He was known for his explosive temper. There's no reason to deny it. "So I guess I'll just get in some training while you are doing very important work of paper pushing." Sasuke taunts her. "You bastard. You know it is important. I have to assign missions and stuff." She protests. "Of course. You couldn't possibly delegate that," Sasuke says and nods his head in mock seriousness. Naruto gives him a good whack upside the head for that comment. She quickly dresses. The blonde scurries out the door. The hyper ninja knew if she stayed much longer, she wouldn't be able to leave. A naked Sasuke was a very hard thing to resist. She heads to the hospital. The young woman was very relieved when she saw Sakura. She rushes over to her, anxious to find out if she was or wasn't pregnant. "Hey, Sakura, do you have a minute to do a chakra test?" she asks brightly. Sure. Why do you want one though? Are you alright?" the pink-haired woman says as she leads Naruto into an exam room. Naruto bites her lower lip. She really didn't know if she should tell Sakura. She loved Sasuke, but she was also good friends with her teammate. The blue-eyed ninja didn't want to hurt the other woman's feelings. She wasn't just a random banshee, Sakura was also their friend. "I'm alright, I just have to know if I'm pregnant or not," she mumbles quickly. Sakura blinks. Naruto thought she might be pregnant. That brought to mind one immediate question. Who was the possible father? She doubted there were multiple possibilities because she couldn't picture Naruto as being anything other than monogamous. Right, I'll give you the test. So if you are pregnant, who is the father?" she asks as she performs the chakra test, having Naruto touch the chakra paper. Chakra tests for pregnancy were rather simple. Whereas normally the paper was used to determine your affinity, in this case it was modified. The paper would turn the color of your natural chakra. If there was another color on it, that meant you were pregnant. In rare cases, the mother and child might have the same color chakra. If that happened, the child's chakra would shimmer on the paper. Guess it doesn't matter. The paper is all reddish-orange. There's no second color or shimmer. Naruto says. She couldn't quite suppress her disappointment. Logically, Naruto knew that she should be relieved. The Hokage had potential assassins after her. Now was definitely not the best time to get pregnant. Her emotions though, apparently didn't care about logic. The blonde hated to admit it, but she knew that Kyuubi was right in a way. Sasuke would stay, if there was a child involved. She didn't doubt for a minute that he loved her, but he hated this village. That and the more she thought about it, the more she wanted to have a living symbol of their love. Naruto, of course it matters. Sakura protests. She would laugh her ass off, if the kid ended up being blonde. Sasuke would be utterly horrified. The Hokage could just imagine his reaction. A blonde Uchiha seemed like a rather mythical being. Sakura was starting to get worried. Naruto was starting to giggle. She was starting to giggle after taking a pregnancy test? This didn't make any sense. "What are you laughing about?" she demands. A blonde Uchiha. Oh my god, he would be so horrified. Naruto snickers. The pink-haired woman tilts her head. She didn't get it. What did a blonde Uchiha have to do with anything? Unless, Sai was right. Sasuke would have been the father. That's why you said a blonde Uchiha. Sakura says in a tone of shock. Naruto gulps. She honestly didn't know how her teammate was going to react to the fact that she and Sasuke were lovers. This might not end well. But she couldn't really deny it now and Sakura would have found out eventually, anyway. Yeah, he would have been. I mean he will eventually. We just aren't actively trying right now. It's a long story. We kinda got caught up in the moment the first time. I wasn't sure. She mumbles quickly. I can't believe it. Sai was actually right. Though I guess it does explain a lot. You were really determined to bring him back. Far more than most people would have been about a friend. I guess I just assumed that you were wired a little differently than most people. Wait, the first time? That means that you two have been together more than once? She asks. Naruto blushes. She wasn't really sure if she wanted to go into detail about her life with Sakura. The woman had been in love with Sasuke and might still be in love with him. It was awkward. That's kinda personal. So I'm just gonna go. I have lots of Hokage work to do. Thanks for the test, Sakura. I'd really appreciate it if you followed the whole patient confidentiality law thing and not tell anyone. The blonde stammers out quickly. Naruto, I wouldn't do that. But how long has this been going on? The pink-haired woman asks. Not that long. A little before we left for the sand. She answers. Sakura sighs and nods. Well, at least it hadn't been going on that long. It wasn't like they had been keeping it a secret from her. Naruto had answered her question when pressed. Oh, I see. Are you two keeping your relationship a secret? The jade-eyed woman inquires. We haven't really talked about it yet. I don't think so. There's not really a reason to. People would find out sooner or later. The blonde replies with a shrug. Sakura nods dumbly. She didn't really know what to say to all this. Sai had been right. They were in love. So I'll see you around. Naruto says awkwardly and darts off. Meanwhile, the council was convening again. They were all rather disappointed. They had spoken to certainly no less than 5 women who agreed to help them. All of the women had approached Sasuke almost immediately after he and Naruto returned to the leaf. He had yet to show interest in any of them. Seriously, they were beginning to wonder if he preferred men. This is getting ridiculous. There has to be at least one woman in the leaf that he would respond to. The councilwoman mutters. Honestly, we are running out of options. Those were all highly competent ninjas. If this keeps up, we might have to ask civilian women for help, and I doubt he'd be interested in someone who wasn't a ninja. Another adds. For someone who wanted to restore his clan, Sasuke was a very difficult man to match. The council members were growing more agitated by the hour. Surely, someone would catch his eye. We need to be suitable about this. If the Hokage finds out, she won't take kindly to our actions. A third member contributes. The others nod in agreement. Naruto had always been protective of the Uchiha. They figured it was because he had been on her team as a genin. If any of them knew the truth, they probably would have fainted. There was a very good reason why Sasuke wasn't responding. He was already taken. He was already taken by a certain blue-eyed, blonde Hokage. Meanwhile, back in the Uchiha district, Sasuke stretches and gets dressed. He might as well get something productive done today. He does a light training session, which would have made most people collapse in exhaustion, and starts on some home repairs. Oh, damn it. Sasuke hisses as sucks on his bruised fingers. He had been gone for so long, that it was only natural there would be some things that needed to get fixed. It wasn't anything he couldn't handle. Alright, so hammers could be rather annoying at times and painful on your fingers, if you didn't strike with them the right way. He could still handle it. Fuck it. Shadow clone jutsu. He mutters and nods in approval when he sees 5 copies of himself. This would make the repair work go much faster. The 6 Sasukes quickly get to work. He would have rather been spending the day in bed with his bubbly blonde, but Sasuke did realize this had to be done. It wasn't like anyone else would do it. They were too afraid of ghosts. He rolls his eyes. Idiots. Did they really think he would have stayed there for almost 6 years after the massacre, if it was haunted by the ghosts of his dead family members? I already miss the sand. At least their villagers aren't usually complete idiots. He mutters to himself. He'd stay in the leaf for Naruto though. She loved this village. Sasuke didn't understand the appeal at all. As far as he was concerned, this village had been nothing but a curse on his entire family. Itachi would still be alive if it wasn't for the Leaf Village. So would the rest of his family for that matter. Sasuke understood attacking the leaf wouldn't bring his family back now. It would also be spitting on Itachi's grave. So he didn't do it for those reasons and because it would have upset Naruto. He still didn't trust this village as far as he could throw it though. Hey, look what I found. One of his clones says, and Sasuke walks over to see what it was. He smiles. It was their first picture as a team. Sakura and Kakashi looked so happy. He and Naruto looked irritated, to put it mildly. He chuckles at the memory. Sasuke twitched. He couldn't believe what Kakashi had just accused him of. The youngest Uchiha was only 13, but he wasn't completely naive. Thankfully, it looked like Naruto was. Are you out of your mind? It was an accident. Sasuke growled at Kakashi. It was an accident that I found you two this morning, both snuggled up into each other in the tent, while you were sleeping. Sasuke, aren't you a little young to be worried about clan restoration? Kakashi asked, and Sasuke wanted to strangle him. What do you mean? And we were not snuggling. It was an accident, Naruto protested. Kakashi shook his head in amusement. Sasuke was once again overcome with the urge to strangle his sensei. How dare he try to imply that Sasuke was some kind of pervert? The silver-haired ninja was the one who read erotic literature in front of 3 teenagers every day, not him. What's going on? Sakura mumbled sleepily as she walked over to see what all the commotion was about. Nothing, Sakura. Just a little bit of team building. Oh right, we should take our first team picture. Kakashi said happily and his picture snapped. The moment was caught forever. Sasuke and Naruto glaring at each other on camera. The two of them convinced it was the other person's fault. Because they did not snuggle. Kakashi always did have a sadistic sense of humor. He mutters. Meanwhile with Naruto, she had finished with her paperwork and decided to go for a walk around the village. The woman wanted to stretch her legs. That and she figured she'd stop by the ramen shop to pick up some lunch. She was hungry. She didn't know whether to be relieved or disappointed that she wasn't eating for 2. While she was trying to sort out her feelings, she didn't notice a wagon coming towards her. The blonde almost got crushed, but she was pushed out of the way at the last second by Shikamaru. What a drag. You really need to watch where you are going. You are too young to be replaced this early. Shikamaru says. Naruto could tell that the lazy ninja was actually worried though. That was a lot closer than it should have been. She mentally kicked herself for almost dying that day. Yeah, I guess I should. Thanks for saving my ass. She says cheerfully. Shikamaru shakes his head in amusement. Naruto was well Naruto. She was probably the only person he knew who could almost get run over by a wagon and be smiling in the next 5 minutes. You're welcome. You sure you are okay? He asks. Yeah, I think so. No big deal. Wonder why the wagon didn't stop. The busty blonde muses. No idea. Shikamaru says. Naruto shrugs. Well, accidents happened. She smiles at Shikamaru and invites him to lunch. He had saved her life. It seemed like the least she could do really. Shikamaru goes with Naruto to the ramen shop. He had a bad feeling about this. That might not have been an accident after all. Still the cloud lover didn't have proof and he didn't want to worry Naruto without it. She'd never take the threat seriously. So I heard Sasuke is back in the village again. He offers awkwardly, trying to change the direction of his thoughts. Yep, he's going to stay for good this time. Naruto replies cheerfully, as if this was truly fantastic news for her. Shikamaru wasn't sure if he entirely believed that. Sasuke had left the leaf twice. Once for revenge and once for redemption. It was hard to picture him actually settling down in the village and forming roots. Do you really think that? Naruto, I know he's your friend and everything, but the man doesn't really have a good track record at the whole sit and stay thing. He warns her. Yeah, I know. But Sasuke doesn't lie. If he says he's staying, then he will. She replies and Shikamaru shakes his head in disbelief. He really didn't understand it. Shikamaru would never be able to comprehend why she had such blind faith in a man who had nearly killed her. But it wasn't really his business. As long as she was safe and happy, that's what mattered most. I hope so. But don't get your hopes up, okay? He asks. I know he's staying this time. So how are things with you and Temari? Naruto asks, trying to squelch down her feeling of unease. Sasuke had left before. He'd done so more than once. He might do it again. The blonde didn't think that he was lying when he said he was going to stay this time. But it brought back a lot of bad memories. Memories that she would rather forget. She can be a very troublesome woman, but I think she's the one. Dad says the fact that she drives me crazy half the time means it's love. He says if you don't want to strangle a person as often as you want to kiss them, it's not real. He says with a shrug. Yeah, he's definitely right about that. Naruto says with a smile. That summed it up nicely. Half the time, she wanted to punch Sasuke. The other half of the time she wanted to jump him or be jumped by him. Maybe this was just how ninjas fell in love. A combination of violence, lust, and camaraderie. She vaguely wondered if this was how her father and mother were before they met their untimely demise. Her time with them had been unbearably brief. Sometimes she wondered which was worse. To not have had a chance to really get to know them before they died or to lose them after you had that chance. She supposed it didn't matter in a way. Maybe that was why they were so drawn to each other, they were both orphans. What makes you say that? You sound like you are speaking from experience. Shikamaru asks and raises an eyebrow. Oh nothing. Just forget I said anything. Naruko says as she quickly begins eating her ramen, using it as a distraction to keep the clever ninja from figuring out what was really going on. Shikamaru looks at her long and hard. She was hiding something. What a drag. Didn't she realize that was pointless? Secrets didn't stay secret very long in the Leaf Village. Sooner or later he was going to find out. Still, it would be annoying to try to drag a real answer out of her. So he decides to let it go for now. But he would find out eventually.
That's all for now. If you want to see next part, then please like this video and subscribe my channel. Thank you.